Hey, what's up guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. So in this video we are going to see what if Harry Potter was raised as a goblin curse breaker. So this will be movie, and if you want more then please leave a like, share and subscribe. Also don't forget to check out my other videos on this channel, so please do check out. Now let's jump right into the video.
Gold remembers. It remembers the heat of the forge and the cold of the vault. It remembers every hand that ever tried to own it, every oath sworn over it, every drop of blood spilled for it. Gold does not care about prophecy. Gold does not care about love. Gold cares about contracts. And on a wet, miserable morning in Little Whinging, beneath a ceiling that smelled like boiled cabbage and old anger, Gold remembered a name that had been left to rot. Potter. Harry didn't know that word yet. He knew stairs and cupboard and quiet. He knew the specific right hum of Uncle Vernon's footsteps, heavy heel, heavier toe, the sound of a man who believed the world should obey him. He knew Aunt Petunia's voice could become a knife without changing pitch. He knew Dudley's laughter meant pain was coming. What Harry didn't know was that the Potter Vault, an ancient thing, older than the Ministry, had listened for him since the night a curse rebounded and made him famous. It hadn't been listening for heroism. It had been listening for a heartbeat. That morning, Harry's heartbeat stuttered. Not from magic, from hunger. He sat cross-legged on the carpet outside the kitchen door. Tiny fingers pressed into his stomach like he could hold the emptiness in. The smell of bacon drifted from the kitchen, rich and impossible, like a story meant for other children. Dudley's plate clattered. Vernon's chair scraped the floor like a warning. Harry stared at the strip of light under the door. Light was safe. Light meant you could see hands coming. He shifted, and his elbow knocked the wall. The cupboard door behind him rattled. Aunt Petunia's voice cut through the room without her even looking at him. "Boy, if you're making noise." Harry flinched. He didn't mean to. He never meant to. His body simply reacted the way a cornered animal did. And that was when it happened. The air trembled, so small nobody in the kitchen noticed. But Harry did. He felt it in his teeth. In the bones behind his eyes. The strip of light under the door sharpened, brightened, became lined. Not brighter like sunlight. Brighter like etched metal. Lines appeared in the light, thin, angular. Precise, like someone had drawn a pattern into the world and then decided to let Harry see it. For half a heartbeat, the wall wasn't a wall. It was a lattice of overlapping shapes, each one locking into the next. Each one holding the house together. Harry blinked. The lattice vanished. And somewhere far beneath the surface of England, stone woke up. Gringotts' wizarding bank did not love. It did not adopt. It did not rescue. Gringotts collected. In the 7th level below Diagon Alley, where the air was cool and dry and tasted faintly of iron, an obsidian slab set int. A corridor wall pulsed once with dull amber light. A goblin paused mid-step. He wasn't tall, not compared to humans. But he carried the kind of presence that made space rearrange itself to avoid him. His coat was cut like a blade. His ears were pierced with rings that weren't decorative. Each ring was a sign of vaults breached and curses survived. He placed 2 fingers on the slab. The amber glow brightened, and a rune thread unfurled across the obsidian like a vein of molten gold. He read it without moving his lips. Then he smiled, small, sharp, and utterly joyless. "Air signal," he said in gobbledygook. The words scraping like metal on stone. Potter Vault. Distress pattern. Threshold breach. A second goblin approached, older, with scarred tissue along his knuckles. He leaned close, eyes narrowing as if the runes offended him personally. Distress. The older one echoed in gobbledygook. A child's tantrum. The first goblin didn't look away from the slab. No tantrum. Hunger. Fear. Pattern repeats. The vault doesn't wake for tantrums. The older goblin's nostrils flared, and his voice lowered. So the surface custodians fail their duty. The first goblin finally lifted his hand. The rune thread remained, suspended like a thin line of light. Not custodians, he corrected. Caretakers. A human arrangement. Weak. Unenforced. The older goblin clicked his tongue. We enforce. A third figure entered the corridor, and the others straightened instantly. This goblin was different. Not because he was larger, he wasn't. Not because he was dressed in finer cloth, he was dressed more simply. Different because his eyes were the color of deep ore veins, dark, unreadable, ancient. His hands, those hands, were marked with faint, silvery scars, like someone had once tr. IED to carve runes directly into his skin. He studied the amber thread. Potter, he said, in English this time. His accent made the word sound like an evaluation. He is alive. Yes, Master Ragnald, the first goblin said. But the vault registers distress. Repeated. Growing. Ragnald's gaze shifted, briefly, to the older goblin. Claws. The older goblin's lips curled back slightly, showing teeth that weren't quite human. The heir security clause. Vault holdings are liable if the heir dies before affirming ownership. Gringotts assumes temporary wardship under Article 7, preservation of asset integrity. Ragnald's expression didn't change, but something in the corridor felt colder. Prepare the retrieval writ, he said. And the surface teams. The first goblin hesitated. The ministry will object. Ragnald's eyes flicked to him like a thrown dagger. Let them, he said softly. We will show them the difference between objection and jurisdiction. Harry heard the knock first. It wasn't like human knocking. Human knocking was impatient. It came in uneven bursts. It carried personality. This knock was precise. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. Pause. 1 tap. Like a code. Vernon opened the front door already angry, as if the very existence of a visitor was an insult. What is it? We're busy. There's no soliciting. His voice died. Harry, still on the carpet outside the kitchen, crept closer, not because he wanted trouble, but because trouble was safer when you could see it. The visitor didn't fill the doorway. He didn't need to. A goblin stood on the step. Rain sliding off his coat like the water didn't dare cling. His shoes were polished so sharply they reflected the gray sky. His eyes were black coins. Behind him, half visible in the rain, stood a witch in ministry robes. Her face tight with frustration and reluctant obedience. And behind her, something else. Not a person, a presence. A tall man in deep blue robes, with a long silver beard and half-moon spectacles. His eyes, when they landed on Harry, softened with a kind of practiced sorrow. Albus Dumbledore. Harry had never seen him before. Harry didn't know his name. But he felt the weight of the man's attention like a hand on the back of his neck. Vernon found his voice again, thin and uncertain now. What is this? Petunia. There's. Vernon Dursley, the goblin said in English. The words were clipped, formal, indifferent. You are currently the caretaker of Harry James Potter. Vernon's cheeks went blotchy. We don't know any. The witch in ministry robes spoke fast. Like she wanted the words out of her mouth before she could regret them. Mr. Dursley, I'm here as an observer from the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. This is a legal matter involving Gringotts. Gringotts. Vernon repeated, as if the word itself tasted like fraud. What do you mean, Gringotts? That's a bank, the goblin supplied. And a sovereign institution. Dumbledore stepped forward slightly. His voice was gentle. Vernon. Petunia. Please. There is no need for alarm. I believe there has been a misunderstanding. The goblin's gaze snapped to Dumbledore. There is no misunderstanding, he said. There is a breach. Petunia appeared behind Vernon like a ghost in an apron, her mouth already pinched. Dudley hovered at her hip, clutching a piece of toast like a weapon. Her eyes found Harry immediately. Not with fear, with fury. She hissed, "Get back." In the cupboard, Harry's feet moved before he could think. Obedience was a habit carved into muscle. He stepped backward, and the air shifted again. For a blink, the hallway around him became a map of lines and angles. The doorframe was a rune. The floorboards were a grid. The space between Petunia and Vernon was a gap in the structure, a weak point where pressure could break things. And in the middle of it all, Harry saw something that made his stomach drop harder than hunger ever had. A thin, golden thread ran from him, straight through the wall, away, down, as if the earth itself had hooked him like a fish. Harry blinked. The thread remained. The goblin's eyes narrowed. He could see it too. That was when Harry understood, without words, that whatever was happening wasn't just about adults and yelling and being sent away. Something underground had found him. The ministry witch cleared her throat. For the record, Griphook of Gringotts. The goblin didn't glance at her. Griphook is a surface liaison name. For legal purposes, I am Griphook son of Grawl. His eyes remained on Harry. And his voice remained cold. And I am here to execute a writ. Vernon puffed himself up again, because that was what he did when frightened. You can't take the boy. He's He's our responsibility. Petunia's hand tightened around Dudley's shoulder. He's nothing to us. Dumbledore's gaze sharpened slightly at that. The goblin didn't react. If anything, he looked pleased. He reached into his coat and produced a roll of parchment. The parchment wasn't sealed with wax. It was sealed with a thin strip of hammered gold, stamped with a rune that made the air taste like pennies. He held it out, not to Vernon, not to Petunia. To the ministry witch. "Read," he ordered. Her jaw clenched. She took the parchment as if it might bite. Her eyes skimmed the first lines, and then her face drained of color. "This is," she began, voice quieter. "This is a Gringotts sovereignty claim. It cites Merlin's bones. This cites pre-ministry treaty law." Dumbledore's expression didn't change, but his fingers, resting lightly on his wand, stilled. The witch swallowed. "It invokes Article 7. Preservation of asset integrity. It claims that the Potter Vault's heir is in distress. That Gringotts has the right to assume temporary wardship to prevent asset loss." The goblin finished, satisfied. Vernon stared, confused by words like treaty and article and the fact that the world had suddenly become bigger than his fists. "You can't call a child an asset." The goblin's smile returned, sharper this time. "We can. We do." Dumbledore stepped forward fully now. "Griphic, son of Grawl, surely you understand the implications. Harry is not merely an heir to a vault. He is a liability," the goblin cut in. "A security risk. A destabilizing element attached to significant holdings. Gringotts will mitigate." The witch's hands trembled slightly as she forced herself to continue reading. "It states, if the heir dies before affirming ownership, the vault holdings enter disputed status. That would trigger a cascade," the goblin said calmly. "Lockdowns, claims, bloodline audits." Dumbledore's eyes flicked toward Harry, and the sorrow in them deepened. Petunia's lips parted, and for a moment, just a moment, fear showed through the anger. Because fear was Petunia's oldest friend. "What does that mean?" she whispered. "Bloodline audits." The goblin turned his head, just slightly, acknowledging her existence like one might acknowledge a stain. "It means," he said, "we will look into every hidden line in your family tree. Every marriage, every stolen coin, every inheritance, every—" "Enough," Dumbledore said softly, and the word carried power. The goblin's eyes narrowed again. He didn't look intimidated. He looked amused. "Ah," he murmured. "The headmaster speaks as if he holds authority here." Dumbledore's voice was still gentle, but there was steel under it now. "Harry was placed here under my protection. And yet," the goblin replied, "the Potter Vault disagrees." The ministry witch forced herself to look up from the parchment. "The claim is valid," she said, and it sounded like it hurt. "By treaty law. If Gringotts enforces it, the ministry can't stop them without violating sovereignty." Vernon's face turned an ugly shade of purple again. "This is insane. You, Petunia, tell them." Petunia's eyes were fixed on Harry now. Not angry, not loving, just calculating. "He's always been strange," she said, as if that explained everything. "He breaks things. He makes things happen." The goblin's gaze flicked to Harry. "The vault hears distress. Distress breeds magic. Magic attracts attention." His eyes shifted to Dumbledore. "And attention breeds theft." Dumbledore's hand tightened around his wand. Harry stood very still. He did not understand treaties or sovereignty or vault cascades. But he understood tone. He understood that adults were arguing over him like he was a thing that could be claimed. A thing that could be taken. A thing that could be lost. The golden thread in his vision trembled, as if reacting to the tension. The goblin stepped forward, not into the house, not yet, but close enough that the rain no longer fell between him and Harry. He spoke a sentence in gobbledygook, low and harsh. Harry didn't understand the words. But he understood the meaning in the way the air locked around them. Contract language. Then the goblin lowered himself slightly, bringing his face closer to Harry's height, and for the first time his expression held something that was almost human. Not kindness. Interest. "You are Harry Potter," he said, and it wasn't a question. It was a designation. Harry didn't answer. No one had ever taught him that answering was safe. The goblin studied him like a puzzle. Then he reached into his pocket and produced a coin. Not a pound. Not a sickle. A thin disc of dull gold etched with a rune Harry had never seen. The goblin held it out. Harry stared at it. Hunger gnawed. Curiosity burned. Petunia's voice snapped, reflexive. Don't you dare give him. The goblin didn't even glance at her. Take, he said to Harry. Harry hesitated. Then, slowly, he reached out and touched the coin with the tip of his finger. The rune flared. Not outward, inward. Harry gasped. For a heartbeat, the hallway exploded into invisible structure, runes stacked like scaffolding. Threads of wards running through walls like veins, the house held together by cheap human intention and cheaper plaster. And beneath it all, the golden thread to the earth became a chain. Harry saw down, into black stone corridors lit by faint amber glow. He saw rails and carts and doors made of iron. He saw a place where the air tasted like metal and the world was made of angles. Then the vision snapped shut. Harry stumbled, catching himself on the wall, heart hammering. The goblin's smile returned, satisfied. He sees, he said quietly. Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. What did you do? The goblin slid the coin back into his pocket as if it were nothing more than a business card. Confirmed compatibility. Compatibility. The ministry witch echoed, alarmed. The goblin turned his head slightly. And for the first time his voice carried a hint of something like pride. Potter Vault curse breaker potential, he said. Hi. Vernon looked like he might explode. I don't care what potential he has. He's staying. The goblin straightened. When he spoke again, it was no longer conversational. It was the voice of a lock turning. By treaty law and vault clause, he said. Gringotts assumes temporary wardship of Harry James Potter effective immediately. He will be removed from this residence. Resistance will be recorded as hostile interference with sovereign banking operations. The ministry witch flinched at the words hostile interference. Dumbledore's voice grew dangerously quiet. You would take him by force. We would take him by right, the goblin corrected. Force is what humans call it when law does not favor them. He gestured with 2 fingers. The air behind him rippled. 2 more goblins stepped into view from the rain, silent as knives. Between them, they carried a small trunk of dark metal bound with silver bands etched in runes that made Harry's eyes ache. Harry's breath caught. Trunks meant leaving. Leaving meant unknown. Unknown was worse than hunger. Petunia's face twisted. Take him, she spat suddenly, as if she wanted the moment over before it could stain her. Take him and don't bring him back. Vernon turned on her. Petunia. Enough, she hissed. He's never been. Dudley began to whine, sensing attention shifting away from him. Mum, what's happening? I don't want him. No one cared. Harry stood in the middle of the hallway with the taste of metal still in his mouth. Dumbledore looked down at him then, and Harry felt the weight of that gaze like sunlight trying to reach through a basement window. Harry. Dumbledore said softly, like the name itself was a promise. I want you to know, I tried. Harry didn't know what that meant. The goblin did. You tried, the goblin agreed. And his tone made the words into an accusation. And you failed. As humans often do, when they assume the world belongs to their intentions. He turned his head toward the ministry witch. Witness. She swallowed. Then nodded stiffly. Witnessed. The goblin faced Harry again. Come, he said. You are under Gringotts' protection now. Protection. Harry had heard the word once, on television. In a show where policemen saved people. He had never heard it used like this. Like a cage made of gold. Harry's feet didn't move. Not because he wanted to stay. Because fear made him heavy. The goblin studied him for a second, then nodded as if he'd expected this. He reached into his pocket again, this time pulling out something different. A small strip of leather with a silver clasp. A collar. Harry's stomach twisted. The goblin held it up, showing Harry the inside. There were runes there, tiny, clean, precise. This is not a leash, the goblin said, and somehow the fact that he had to clarify made it worse. It is a ward band. It will keep you alive. Alive. Harry swallowed. The cupboard, the hunger, the fists, the shouting, alive had always been an accident. Now alive was a clause. Harry lifted his chin. His eyes met the goblin's. The goblin's gaze didn't soften. But it did, acknowledge. Harry took a step forward. Then another. The goblin crouched and fastened the ward band around Harry's wrist. The clasp clicked, and the runes warmed against Harry's skin, not comforting, but stable, like a wall. The golden thread inside Harry's vision steadied. The goblin stood. He nodded once, sharply, as if a transaction had been completed. Good, he said. Then he turned toward the rain, and the goblins moved with him, guiding Harry without touching him. As if touch implied ownership, and ownership had rules. Dumbledore watched from the doorway, face unreadable. As Harry stepped out into the wet morning, cold rain splashing his bare ankles, he looked back once. Not at Vernon, not at Dudley, at Petunia. She stood stiff in the hallway, arms crossed, eyes bright with something that might have been tears, or might have been fury at being reminded of her sister. Harry didn't know. He didn't wait to find out. He walked down the path. Down the street. Toward the place the golden chain inside him had shown. They didn't take him through Diagon Alley. They took him through the bank. Through Gringotts' marble floors and glittering chandeliers, past witches and wizards who stared too long and then looked away when goblin eyes caught them. Harry's small hand hovered near the ward band on his wrist the entire time. He kept expecting it to burn him. It didn't. The goblin, Grippic, led him to a door Harry had never noticed before, even in pictures. It was set into the side of the grand hall like a seam in the world. No sign, no handle. Grippic pressed his palm to the stone. Runes flared. The door opened with a sound like a vault exhaling. Harry smelled the underground before he saw it. Cold stone, old metal, and something faintly alive, like the earth's breath. A rail track descended into darkness. A cart waited. Harry stared at it. It looked like something meant for hauling ore, not children. Grippic gestured. Enter. Harry climbed in. The metal seat was cold through his thin clothes. His feet didn't reach the floor. He wrapped his arms around himself. Another goblin stepped into the cart behind him and set the rune-bound trunk down like it weighed nothing. Grippic stood at the front, hand on a lever. He looked back at Harry one last time. In the deep, he said, "We do not ask if you are special." The cart clicked. The rails hummed. Grippick's eyes narrowed with something like anticipation. In the deep, he finished. "We ask if you are useful." Then he pulled the lever. The cart lurched forward, and Harry Potter dropped into the throat of the earth, carried by iron and law and gold that had finally remembered his name. Down, 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 into Gringotts, into stone, into a life where magic was not a miracle. It was a mechanism, and mechanisms could be broken. The first thing Harry learned about the deep was that it didn't care if you were tired. The cart screamed around a bend, sparks snapping off the rails like angry fireflies. Wind tore at Harry's face, cold enough to sting. He clamped his mouth shut and gripped the edge of the seat so hard his fingers went numb. He didn't scream, not because he was brave. Because screaming was a luxury you only used when someone cared. The tunnels blurred, stone ribs and iron veins, until the cart finally slowed with a shuddering groan. It rolled into a cavern where the ceiling vanished into darkness and the walls were carved so smoothly they looked melted. Amber lights glowed in regular patterns, not torches, not lamps, runes embedded into the stone like fossilized lightning. Harry climbed out on shaking legs. His ward band was warm now. Like it had adjusted to the temperature and decided to keep him at a steady, survivable human. Grippic stepped out like the cart ride had been a stroll down the street. Two other goblins followed, then lifted the trunk and carried it away without speaking. Harry watched it go, heart tightening. He owned nothing. Nothing had ever stayed his. Grippic noticed. "Your belongings?" he asked, tone flat. Harry hesitated, then shrugged. He didn't know what counted as belongings. The cupboard. His broken toy soldier. The thin blanket that smelled like dust. Grippick's mouth twitched. Not sympathy. Amusement. "Then you begin properly," he said. Empty. He turned and walked across the cavern. Harry followed automatically. The deeper corridors weren't like hallways in houses. They were engineered. Lines cut sharp. Corners precise. Doors sealed with runes instead of locks. Every surface looked like it had been designed to resist magic, and if it didn't, it looked like it had been punished until it did. Harry kept glancing at the air, half expecting to see the lattice of lines again. He did. Not all the time. Not like a constant overlay. But whenever he passed a rune-set seam in the wall. Whenever the floor pattern changed, whenever a door breathed open, his vision caught the hidden structure for a blink, like his eyes couldn't stop counting. Grippic stopped before a door that wasn't a door. It was a slab of black stone with a narrow groove running down the center. No hinges, no handle, no visible seam besides the groove. He spoke a sentence in gobbledygook. The groove filled with a pale metallic light that flowed downward like liquid mercury. The slab parted. Harry expected a room. He got a testing chamber. The space beyond was small and bare, a stone bench, a metal basin, and a rune circle etched into the floor. The air smelled faintly of old blood and clean silver. Harry froze at the threshold. His instincts, trained by cupboards and shouting, screamed that rooms like this were where bad things happened. Grippic didn't push him. He simply waited. It was worse, because waiting implied choice. Harry stepped inside. The slab closed behind him with a soft, final sound. Harry spun toward it, panic rising. Griphook's voice cut through. Stand in the circle. Harry looked down. The rune circle was a ring of symbols carved so finely they were almost hairlines. Some were sharp, some curved, all of them wrong in a way Harry couldn't explain. Like letters that weren't meant to be seen by human eyes. He backed away instinctively. Griphook's gaze sharpened. You are under wardship. Under wardship, we verify identity. We verify attachment. Attachment, Harry repeated before he could stop himself. His voice sounded strange in the deep. Too small for the stone to care. Griphook's eyes flicked to Harry's scar. Harry's hand flew up to cover it. Lower your hand, Griphook said. Harry didn't. The air went colder. Not physically, Harry's ward band adjusted again, pushing warmth through his wrist, but socially. Like a door closing, Griphook moved. He didn't stomp. He didn't rush. He simply took one step closer, and the space between them became a measured threat. You will learn, he said, that disobedience is expensive. Harry's stomach twisted. Expensive. Like coins. Like food. Like the word asset. Slowly, Harry lowered his hand. Griphook nodded once, as if acknowledging a correct answer on an exam. Good, he said. Stand. Harry stepped into the circle. The moment his foot crossed the line, the runes flared. Not bright, sharp. A thin web of light snapped up around him, a cage made of geometry. Harry's breath caught as the web touched his skin without touching it, like cold air brushing every nerve. The scar on his forehead burned. Harry gasped, hands flying up too late. A golden thread burst into Harry's vision, thick and furious. It wasn't just a chain now. It was a hook, and it was hooked into something inside him. Harry's knees went weak. He swayed. Griphook watched him with the calm interest of someone watching a lockpick itself. From the walls, a low hum began, stone resonating like a tuning fork. Harry couldn't see the rune web anymore. He could see through it. He saw layers. He saw the ward band on his wrist as a looping sequence of runes feeding warmth into his veins. He saw the chamber's circle as a system, input, output, containment, verification. And he saw the scar. Not as a mark, as a knot. A tangled, rotting knot of something that didn't belong in him. It pulsed once. Harry made a sound he didn't recognize, half choke, half growl. The rune web tightened. Not crushing. Testing. Griphook spoke without raising his voice. Do you see it? Harry didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyes were fixed on the knot in his own skull, and in that knot he felt a presence like a splinter of ice. A whisper. Not words. Intent. Hungry. Hateful. Old. Harry's stomach heaved. The rune web flared brighter. The knot recoiled as if the runes were pain. Harry's vision snapped back to normal so hard he stumbled backward, still inside the circle, still trapped by the web. He panted, heart pounding. Sweat cold on his skin. Griphook's expression hadn't changed, but his eyes were sharper. Compatible, he said softly. And compromised. Harry swallowed hard. Comp. Griphook lifted a hand. Later. He turned toward the metal basin, dipped his fingers into it, and came up with a liquid that shimmered like silver trying to pretend it was water. He flicked it onto the rune circle. The runes hissed. The web collapsed. Harry fell to one knee, catching himself on the stone with a scraped palm. Griphook stepped closer and offered a hand. Harry stared at it. He didn't take it. Griphook didn't look offended. He simply withdrew his hand as if it had never been offered. Now, he said, we address names. Harry blinked, still dizzy. My name is Harry. Griphook's eyes narrowed just slightly. That is a sound humans make when they wish to call you. That sound has no weight here until it is recorded. Harry's throat tightened. But, it's my name. Griphook crouched again, bringing his face level with Harry's. In Gringotts, he said, names are keys. Keys open doors. Doors lead to vaults. Vaults hold gold. Gold holds power. Therefore, names hold power. Harry stared. Griphook's voice stayed flat. If we give you a key without measuring your hand, you will drop it. If you drop it, someone else will pick it up. He stood and reached into his coat again. This time, he pulled out a thin slate of dark stone and a stylus made of pale bone. Dragon bone. Harry recognized it, not because he'd been taught, but because when the stylus moved, the air around it felt steadier. Like chaos had been told to sit down. Grippick placed the slate on the stone bench. Speak, he ordered. Harry's mouth went dry. What? Speak your full designation, Grippick said. As humans know it. Harry swallowed. Harry James Potter. The moment he said Potter, the ward band warmed like it approved. Grippick's eyes flicked to it. He wrote on the slate. The marks weren't English letters. They were runes. Operators. Clauses. He spoke as he wrote, and the words in gobbledygook felt like metal filings dragged across Harry's brain. Then Grippick stopped. He lifted the stylus. Now, he said, Gringotts names you. Harry's pulse spiked. You can't. Grippick's gaze pinned him. You are under wardship. Under wardship, you are assigned a working key. Harry clenched his scraped palm into a fist. He had been named by people who hated him. Boy. Freak. Thing. He didn't want another name. Grippick leaned in. You will not be called boy here, he said, voice low. Not because we care about your feelings. Because imprecision is sloppy. Harry's breath hitched. Grippick tapped the stylus on the slate. A working name must be earned, he continued. But you are a child. You must have something until you earn better. He looked at the slate like he was judging a blade's balance. Then he wrote a single rune. It looked like a split triangle with a line through it. When the rune settled into the slate, the chamber's lights dimmed for a heartbeat, as if the stone itself acknowledged the mark. Grippick spoke one word. Keth. Harry felt it in his bones. Not like hearing. Like being tagged. Keth. Grippick repeated, and now Harry understood the shape of it, a goblin term used in vault work. Not a compliment. A category. A designation for something that cuts into curse knots. A wedge. A breaker. Harry's mouth opened. That's a working key, Grippick said. Short. Sharp. Hard to steal. He looked at Harry's wrist. Touch the slate. Harry hesitated. Then, slowly, he placed his palm on the dark stone. The rune flared. Heat shot up his arm, not burning, but binding. The ward band pulsed. The golden T, red inside him tightened like a knot being cinched. Harry gasped. The rune's light sank into his skin. He yanked his hand back. On his palm, faint as a bruise, the shape of the split triangle remained. Harry stared at it, horrified. You marked me. Grippick's smile returned, small, sharp. We recorded you. Harry's voice shook. Can you take it off? Yes, Grippick said. Harry's hope surged. When your wardship ends, Grippick finished. Or when you earn a better key. Harry's hope collapsed into something colder. Grippick stood and tucked the slate away. Come, he said. Keth. Harry flinched at the sound of the name. But the ward band warmed again, and he felt, deep inside, how the rune on his palm connected to the chain leading downward. Like a key sliding into a lock. He walked through corridors that grew narrower and older as they descended. Not deeper into the bank's public levels. Deeper into the working veins. Here, the air was colder and the stone had teeth. Sharp crystals jutting from the walls like frozen screams. Tracks ran along the floor. Doors were marked with warning glyphs that made Harry's scalp prickle. Goblins passed them without staring, but their eyes flicked to Harry's wrist. To his palm, to his scar. Evaluating. Measuring. One goblin muttered something in gobbledygook that sounded like surface blood. Another replied with a tone that wasn't quite contempt. Vault blood, the second corrected. Grippick didn't stop. He led Harry into a small chamber that looked less like a prison and more like a bunker. A narrow bed carved from stone. A blanket that actually looked clean. A shelf built into the wall. A metal cup. No toys. No pictures. No softness. Harry stood in the doorway, unsure what to do. Grippick gestured once. This is your allocation. Harry blinked. My room. Grippick's eyes narrowed. Do not get sentimental. It is a sleeping cell. Harry's throat tightened anyway. A sleeping cell with a blanket was still better than a cupboard. Grippick stepped inside and placed something on the shelf, a small pouch that clinked. Harry's eyes locked onto it automatically. Coins meant food. Food meant survival. Grippick watched him notice. Your stipend, he said. You will learn to count. You will learn to budget. If you waste it, you will be hungry. Hunger teaches faster than kindness. Harry swallowed. Griphook moved toward the door. Then paused. He looked back at Harry, expression unreadable. You saw something in the verification circle, he said. Harry's hand drifted to his scar. Do not touch it, Griphook snapped. And the air went colder again. Harry froze. Griphook's voice lowered. That knot inside you is not ours. It is not Gringotts' property. It is a foreign curse anchor. It will attract thieves. Harry's stomach churned. Thieves. Griphook's eyes gleamed like black ore. Wizards. Dark ones. Light ones. All the same when gold is involved. He reached out and tapped Harry's ward band. This will keep most of them out, he said. But not all. Then he stepped back. You will survive, Griphook said, and it wasn't comfort. It was expectation. You will learn. You will be useful. He turned to leave. Harry's voice slipped out before he could stop it, small and raw. Why? Griphook paused at the threshold. He didn't turn around immediately. When he finally did, his expression was the closest thing to honesty Harry had seen from him. Because your vault woke, Griphook said simply. And because you can see. He held Harry's gaze. And because, he added, you are a problem that can be made into a weapon. Then the stone door slid shut. The runes on it dimmed. Harry stood alone in the sleeping cell, staring at his marked palm. Keth. A working key. A wedge. A breaker. The deep was quiet, but it wasn't silent. The stone hummed faintly. The ward band pulsed like a heartbeat. And somewhere far below, something ancient and hungry in the earth seemed to breathe, slow, patient. Waiting for him to become what Gringotts intended. Harry climbed onto the bed. He pulled the blanket over himself. For the first time in his life, no one shouted at him to stop breathing too loud. And for the first time in his life, that didn't feel like safety. It felt like being stored. Like being placed on a shelf. Until someone decided to take him out and use him. Harry learned quickly that the deep had its own concept of morning. There was no sun. There was no window to tell you the world still existed above. No birds. No kettle whistles. No smell of toast. Morning, down here, was a sound, the low grind of rails as carts began to move. The distant clang of metal against stone. The measured cadence of boots, goblin boots, hitting corridor floor in a rhythm that didn't rush because it didn't need to. Harry opened his eyes to that rhythm and lay still. He waited for a shout. He waited for a door to slam open and a hand to drag him out by his shirt. Nothing happened. The quiet pressed on him, heavy and unnatural, like a blanket laid over panic. Eventually, his stomach forced him to move. Hunger didn't care about fear. He sat up and stared at the pouch Griphook had left on the shelf. It made a soft, promising clink when he touched it. Coins. He untied it carefully. Inside were a few dull gold discs and several silver pieces that looked sharper than wizard coins, edges too clean, faces too precise. Each had runes stamped into it, not portraits. Harry held one up to the rune light. The rune seemed to settle under his gaze, like it wanted to be read. He didn't know how, but his eyes traced the lines anyway. One curve, one angle, a small split, like a fork in a path. His head hurt faintly, the way it had in the verification chamber. He put the coin down. The ward band warmed, as if approving restraint. Then the stone door slid open without warning. Harry flinched so hard he nearly fell off the bed. A goblin stood in the doorway. Not Griphook, this one was younger, narrower, with one ear nicked at the tip like it had been bitten off. His coat was plain and his hands were stained with something dark that might have been ink or blood. His eyes swept Harry in a quick, cold assessment. You, the goblin said in English. He didn't bother with Harry's name. Come. Harry's mouth went dry. Where? The goblin's lips pulled back slightly, not a smile. Work. Harry's heart kicked. He slid off the bed, keeping his hands visible the way he'd learned to do around Vernon. The goblin watched him like Harry might try to escape. Harry didn't. He followed. The corridors outside felt different now that he'd slept in the deep. They weren't just passages, they were layers. He could feel the bank like a living creature, the thick, safe arteries near the surface, the narrower veins farther down, the hidden bones beneath it all where old wards had calcified into something permanent. They passed other goblins moving in efficient silence. No one spoke to Harry. But their eyes flicked to his wrist. To his marked palm. To his scar. He hated the scar more in the deep. Above, it had been a strange mark no one talked about. Down here, it felt like a crack in a vault door. Something that could be pried open. The younger goblin led him into a long chamber lit by rows of amber runes embedded in the ceiling. Tables lined the room, each one carved from black stone, each one etched with shallow grids like they were meant for drawing maps. At the far end stood Grippic, hands clasped behind his back as if he'd been waiting the entire time. Beside him stood another goblin. Old, not just wrinkled, dense, like stone that had been worn smooth by centuries. His hair was thin and gray, braided close to his skull. His fingers were long and scarred, and each scar glinted faintly, silver-white. His eyes were the color of raw ore. When he looked at Harry, Harry felt something in the air tighten, like the room itself held its breath. Grippic spoke first. Keth. Harry flinched at the name, but stepped forward. The old goblin's gaze dropped to Harry's palm. He reached out and, without asking, seized Harry's hand and turned it over to study the mark. His grip was iron. Harry's instinct screamed to yank away. He didn't. The old goblin released him after a moment and made a sound in gobbledygook that was half approval, half insult. Grippic translated, amused. He says your mark is neat. That means whoever wrote it was sober. Harry's throat tightened. He didn't know how to feel about that being praise. The old goblin spoke in English, his voice rough as gravel. I am Ragnald. Harry's eyes widened. The name hit him like a pressure change. Even if he didn't know who Ragnald was, his body understood the way the room reacted. The younger goblin straightened. The air steadied. Ragnald bent slightly, bringing his face closer. You will learn numbers, he said. You will learn stone. You will learn why humans die in vaults they think they own. Harry swallowed. I'm only small, Ragnald finished. Yes, small things fit into cracks. Small things wedge open doors. He looked at Grippic. Show. Grippic nodded and gestured toward a table. On it lay a flat slab of pale stone. Across the slab, someone had carved lines, interlocking shapes, angles meeting angles, curves layered over straight edges. At first glance, it looked like a pretty pattern. Then Harry's eyes caught the structure. The pattern wasn't decoration. It was a machine. His breath hitched. Ragnald watched his reaction and the corner of his mouth twitched. You see. Harry didn't answer. His gaze was glued to the lines. He could almost hear them humming. Ragnald slapped the slab with an open palm. The pattern flared. A translucent barrier snapped up above it, an invisible sheet that shimmered like heat haze. Harry recoiled instinctively. The barrier didn't move. Ragnald pointed at it. Ward. Simple. Surface ward. Human design. Efficient for keeping out thieves with wands and big mouths. He picked up a small metal needle from the table and flicked it at the barrier. The needle bounced off with a sharp ping and clattered to the floor. Ragnald's eyes gleamed. Break it. Harry stared. I don't have a wand. Ragnald's grin widened, ugly and delighted. Good. He reached under the table and pulled out a tool the length of Harry's forearm. A chisel. Goblin silver, dull, matte, hungry looking. Runes ran down its spine in thin grooves filled with black resin. Ragnald held it out. Harry's hands hesitated. The chisel looked like a weapon. It looked like a promise. Grippick's voice came quietly from behind. It will not obey you if you treat it like a toy. Harry looked up. Grippick's expression was flat, but his eyes were sharp. Tools are contracts. Touch it with intent and the tool will answer. Touch it with fear and it will eat you. Harry's stomach twisted. He reached out and took the chisel. The moment his fingers closed around the grip, the ward band warmed, steadying. The runes on the chisel didn't flare bright. They darkened slightly, like ink absorbing light. Harry felt a faint vibration run up his arm into his teeth. Ragnald leaned closer. Not force. Not shouting. Wards are not walls. Wards are equations. Harry blinked. Equations. Ragnald tapped the stone slab's pattern with a knuckle. Input. Output. Condition. Response. Humans paint wards like children. Goblins carve them like engineers. He pointed to one section of the pattern where 3 lines met. 3 anchors, he said. Triangle. Stable. Humans love triangles. Makes them feel clever. Harry's eyes traced it. He saw it. Not just the shape, the function. The triangle was a brace. Holding the ward's pressure stable. Ragnald's voice lowered. If you cut the wrong line, the ward discharges. It will burn your hands off. If you cut the right line, the ward collapses quietly. No discharge. No scream. Harry swallowed hard. How do I know which? Ragnald's grin vanished. Math, he said simply. And listening. He tapped Harry's temple with one scarred finger. You have eyes that can see structure, he said. You have ears that can hear resonance. If you waste these gifts on fear, you deserve what the ward gives you. Harry's fingers tightened around the chisel. He stepped toward the barrier. Up close, the ward shimmered, faint, almost polite. Like it wasn't meant to harm, only deny. Harry lifted the chisel and hovered it near the barrier. The vibration in the tool changed. Higher pitch. Like a thin string pulled too tight. His teeth ached. He moved the chisel slowly along the barrier's surface without touching it. Lee. A doctor with a stethoscope searching for a heartbeat. The pitch dipped in one place. Harry paused. His eyes flicked down to the carved pattern on the slab, and his vision caught the hidden geometry again, lines beneath lines. Pressure points, a subtle imbalance where the triangle anchor didn't align perfectly. A flaw. A human flaw. Harry's breathing slowed. He lowered the chisel. Just a touch. The ward hummed angrily. Harry flinched but held firm. Ragnald's voice was a low growl behind him. Do not stab. Do not swing. You are not fighting. You are solving. Harry nodded shakily. He pressed the chisel's edge against the ward at the point where the pitch dipped, and he angled it, not straight, but sideways, aligning it with the rune line beneath. Then he applied pressure. The ward resisted like taut skin. Harry pushed harder. The ward shivered. A crack of light spidered out from the chisel's edge. Harry gasped. He felt the ward's tension gather like a fist preparing to strike. Ragnald snapped. Stop. Think. Harry froze. The crack remained. The ward didn't discharge yet, but it wanted to. Harry stared at the pattern again and realized the truth with a cold drop in his stomach. He'd found the flaw, yes. But he'd cut the support line, not the release line. He was about to turn the ward into a bomb. Harry swallowed. His palms went sweaty. The knot in his scar pulsed faintly. As if pleased. Harry hated that. He forced himself to breathe. He forced his mind into the grid. If the support line held the pressure stable, then cutting it further would destabilize. Which meant the pressure needed somewhere to go. A vent. A release. His eyes scanned the carved pattern. The triangle anchor. The braces. The loops. He found it. A thin curved line feeding into the ward's outer ring. Designed to siphon excess pressure into the stone. Humans had built a safety valve. Harry's lips parted in disbelief. He shifted the chisel away from the crack, careful not to worsen it. And moved toward the curved line. The pitch changed again, lower, softer. This line was meant to be cut. Harry placed the chisel edge, angled perfectly along the curve, and pressed. The ward hummed, not angry now, but strained. Harry pushed steadily. The curved line on the slab's pattern flared, then dimmed, as if a circuit had been severed. The ward exhaled. A crack of light at the first cut dissolved like mist. The entire barrier flickered once. And collapsed without a sound. Harry stumbled forward, nearly falling as the resistance vanished. He caught himself on the table, breathing hard. Silence. Then a sharp click. Harry turned. Ragnald was tapping one clawed finger against his own palm. A goblin gesture that wasn't quite applause, but close. Griphook's eyes gleamed. The younger goblins murmured in gobbledygook, fast and harsh. Harry caught one word repeated. Keth. Wedge. Breaker. Ragnald stepped forward and took the chisel from Harry's hands with the casual authority of someone taking back a knife. He inspected the edge. Then he looked at Harry. You did not break it by strength, Ragnald said. You broke it by understanding. Harry's chest still hurt. I almost. Yes, Ragnald said, pleased. You almost died. That means you were learning. Harry stared at him, horrified. Ragnald leaned in again, eyes like ore seams. This is the deep. You will bleed for mistakes. Better to bleed now, here, where we control the ward. Later you will bleed in a vault that has eaten better men. He straightened. Again, Ragnald said. Harry blinked. Again. Griphook slid another slab onto the table. This one's pattern was different, more complex, more layered. Ragnald's grin returned. Again, he repeated. Until your hands stop shaking. Until your eyes stop pleading. Until your brain becomes a ledger. Harry's stomach sank. The day stretched in front of him like a tunnel. Hours later, maybe, Harry couldn't tell time without sun. But his body could count exhaustion, his hands trembled violently. His scraped palm had reopened and bled onto the stone. His head throbbed from staring at rune lines until they swam. He'd failed twice. The first time, the ward had discharged a harmless, but humiliating, burst of smoke that left his hair smelling like burnt copper. The second time, the ward had snapped like a whip and struck his wrist. The ward band had flared instantly, absorbing most of it, but Harry still felt the sting in his bones. Ragnald had watched with cold satisfaction. "Good," he'd said. "Now you remember." Harry remembered everything. He remembered the sharp hum before a discharge. The way the air thickened. The way certain runes made his teeth ache. The way silver runes felt, clean, and iron runes felt, angry. He remembered that his scar pulsed subtly whenever wards got violent, like something inside him enjoyed the possibility of harm. That scared him more than the goblins. Finally, after another successful collapse, quiet, precise, Ragnald stepped back. "Enough," he said. Harry's knees nearly buckled with relief. Griphic approached and placed a small metal cup on the table. Inside was thick stew, dark and steaming. Harry's stomach roared. He reached for it, and stopped. He looked up at Griphic, waiting for the trick. Waiting for the yank away. Griphook's expression was unreadable. "Eat." Harry's hands shook as he lifted the cup. He ate fast, because hunger didn't negotiate. The stew tasted like salt and iron and something rich, mushrooms, maybe. His belly-like warmth poured into a hollow space. Ragnald watched him eat as if he were observing a mechanism taking fuel. When Harry finished, Ragnald spoke. "You will not learn wizard spells first," he said. "You will learn structure. You will learn that every curse has logic, and every logic has a weakness." Harry swallowed. "What about school?" Ragnald's eyes narrowed. "Surface school." Harry nodded. Griphic answered instead. "Later." Ragnald leaned closer, voice rougher. "When you walk into Hogwarts, they will teach you wand flicks and words. They will teach you to throw magic like stones." He tapped the table pattern with one claw. "We will teach you to look at the stone wall and ask, where does it crack?" Harry's throat tightened, because a part of him, small, buried under fear, felt something else. Not safety, not comfort, but a strange, cold excitement. Understanding meant control. Control meant no cupboards. Control meant no fists. Ragnald straightened. Dean spoke the next words like a curse and a blessing at once. "You are not being raised to be loved," he said. "You are being raised to be useful." He turned away. Griphic lingered a moment, then leaned down so only Harry could hear. "Usefulness," he murmured, "is the closest thing the Deep gives to protection." Harry stared at his marked palm, the faint rune still visible like a bruise. Keth. Wedge. Breaker. He didn't know if that was a destiny or a prison. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. If the Deep was going to shape him into a weapon, he would learn how to choose where the blade pointed. On the fourth day, Harry thought it was the fourth, the Deep didn't hand out calendars. Ragnald stopped giving him wards to break. Instead, he took him somewhere that smelled like heat. Not kitchen heat. Forge heat. The corridor widened into a chamber where the air shimmered faintly, thick with metal breath. The walls were streaked with soot, and the stone floor held burned scars like old memories. Rows of tools hung on the far wall, chisels, hooks, needles, tongs, each one etched with runes so thin they looked like veins. And in the center of it all sat a forge that didn't use fire. It used runes. A ring of carved symbols circled a hollow in the floor. Inside the hollow glowed a low, steady orange that pulsed like a heart. The heat was controlled, disciplined, like anger locked behind a door. Harry stared, transfixed. Griphook's voice cut in from behind him. "You like it." Harry blinked. "It's different. It is controlled," Griphook corrected. "Fire is wild. Rune heat is obedient." Ragnald stepped forward, hands behind his back, and looked at Harry the way he looked at ward patterns, as something that could be measured and improved. "You have been breaking lines," Ragnald said. "Now you will learn to make them." Harry's stomach tightened. "I don't know how." Ragnald's grin showed teeth. "Good." He snapped his fingers, and a younger goblin rolled over a cart stacked with raw materials, dull silver ingots, a strip of black basalt, coils of fine copper wire, and, wrapped carefully in oilcloth, something pale and curved. Bone. Not human. Too thick. Too heavy. Dragon bone. Harry's eyes fixed on it. The knot in his scar pulsed once, like it recognized power and wanted to bite it. Harry swallowed hard and forced his gaze away. Ragnald noticed anyway. Your scar is reactive, he said flatly. Foreign curse anchor. Harry's fingers curled. Can you remove it? Ragnald's eyes narrowed, almost offended by the simplicity of the question. Removal is not first. First is containment. You do not cut out rot before you understand how it spreads. Griphook's voice was quiet, almost amused. Humans think bravery is ripping the knife out. Goblins think bravery is learning where the knife sits, and keeping it from moving. Harry's throat went dry. Ragnald gestured toward the forge circle. Focus tools are how you will live. You will not have a wand. Harry flinched. Why not? Ragnald's expression turned faintly contemptuous. Because wands are human comfort sticks. They depend on emotion, lineage, and permission. He leaned closer. A tool depends on design. Design depends on math. Math does not care what you feel. Harry's stomach sank and lifted at the same time. Math. Structure. Things that didn't shout at him. Ragnald picked up a goblin silver ingot and dropped it into Harry's hands. It was heavier than it looked. Cold, dense, indifferent. Feel it, Ragnald said. Harry held it awkwardly. It's just metal. Ragnald's clawed finger tapped the ingot. Silver conducts intent cleanly. It holds runes without warping. It does not forgive sloppy work. He moved to the basalt strip and rapped it with his knuckle. Basalt dampens magic. It keeps your tool from screaming when you push power through it. Then he unwrapped the dragon bone. The pale curve caught the forge light and seemed to drink it. Tiny natural grooves ran along it like the bone had grown its own runes. Harry felt his teeth ache. The knot in his scar pulsed again, harder. Ragnald's gaze sharpened. Control it. Harry froze. Control what? Ragnald stepped into Harry's space until Harry could smell him. Metal, stone, something faintly acidic like ink. That reaction. That hunger. It is not yours, but it is inside you. Harry's breath hitched. He didn't know how to control hunger. Hunger had controlled him his whole life. Ragnald's voice dropped. Count. Harry blinked. What? Count, Ragnald repeated, slower. As if speaking to something stubborn. Numbers force the mind into lines. Lines force the curse to stay in its corner. Harry swallowed and stared at the forge circle. The runes pulsed in a steady rhythm. He started counting under his breath. 1, 2, 3. The knot in his scar kept pulsing, like a fist trying to open. 4, 5, 6. The ward band warmed on his wrist, steadying him. Feeding him a calm that wasn't comfort, stability. 7, 8, 9. The pulse slowed. Not gone, but caged. Ragnald nodded once. Good. You will use counting until it becomes instinct. If you let that anchor steer you, you will become a vault hazard. Harry's fingers tightened around the silver ingot. I don't want it. Ragnald's grin returned, sharp, pleased. Want is irrelevant. You have it. He turned, walking toward the forge circle. Now, make. They didn't start with a blade. They didn't start with something heroic. They started with a stylus. A dragon, bone writing tool that would let Harry carve or draw runes into soft stone, wax, or metal, his first real, casting, instrument. Ragnald placed a flat strip of goblin silver on a table near the forge. This will be the spine. He held up the dragon bone piece. This will be the core. Then he handed Harry a thin bundle of copper wire. This will be the binding. Harry stared at the materials they were a puzzle he didn't know how to solve. Griphook slid in beside him. Say it. Harry frowned. Say what? Griphook tapped Harry's marked palm. Your working name is a key. Keys speak in the deep. Harry's jaw clenched. He hated that the name stuck to him. He hated that it meant something here when Harry didn't. But he also hated that he needed it. He swallowed. Keth. The word L. F'd his mouth and the rune on his palm warmed faintly. The silver strip on the table settled. Not moving, just feeling less like dead metal and more like a thing waiting to be shaped. Griphook's eyes gleamed. Good. Tools listen for consistency. Ragnald gestured at the forge circle. Heat. Harry stepped closer, eyes narrowing at the runes. He could see the structure now, could almost feel the math under it. The runes weren't random symbols. They were functions controlling temperature, pressure, flow. Ragnald handed him a small stone token etched with a single rune. Press it into the heat circle, he ordered. At the third mark, Harry looked for the third mark, 3 small notches cut into the floor ring. He found them, pressed the token in. The forge pulsed. The orange glow deepened. Heat rolled up like a wave. Harry flinched but held his ground. Ragnald's voice was calm. Do not jump. Do not panic. Panicking spills. Harry stared at the silver strip. Put it in, Ragnald said. Harry did. The silver didn't melt instantly. It softened first, edges rounding, surface turning faintly liquid. The heat was precise, only affecting what the runes allowed. Harry's eyes widened. It was like the forge was thinking. Ragnald pushed the dragon bone core into the softened silver with tongs, and the silver flowed around it like it wanted to hold it. Grippic held out the copper wire. Bind. Harry's hands trembled. He took the wire and started wrapping it around the silver and bone assembly. His wraps were uneven. Ragnald's claw came down on Harry's wrist, stopping him. Again, Ragnald said. Harry swallowed. I did it. You did it poorly, Ragnald corrected. Poor binding creates weak resonance. Weak resonance means your tool will misfire. Misfire means you die. Harry's throat tightened, and anger flashed, small, hot, frightened. His scar pulsed. The knot stirred like it liked anger. Harry forced his jaw shut and began again. This time, he counted the wraps. 1, 2, 3. The counting steadied his breathing, made his hands less shaky. He wrapped the wire evenly, each coil tight, each overlap consistent, like building a ladder rung by rung. Ragnald watched, expression unreadable. When Harry finished, the copper sat like a neat spine along the stylus. Ragnald nodded. Quench. Harry blinked. In water. Ragnald gave him a look of deep insult. In oil. Water shocks metal. Shocks create cracks. Cracks become failure points. He slid a basin of dark oil toward Harry. Harry lifted the hot stylus with tongs and lowered it into the oil. The oil hissed. Steam rose, thick, metallic. Harry's scar burned sharply, like the foreign knot hated the way the tool stabilized the air. Harry's breath hitched. Ragnald snapped, count. Harry swallowed pain and counted. 1, 2, 3. The burn eased. The tool cooled. Ragnald plucked it out and held it up to the amber light. A stylus, goblin silver spine, dragon bone core. Copper binding, etched already with shallow rune grooves waiting to be filled. Griphook's eyes narrowed approvingly. Not terrible. Ragnald handed it to Harry. The moment Harry touched it, the ward band warmed and the rune on his palm pulsed. The stylus vibrated faintly, like it recognized him as its handler. Harry stared at it. It wasn't a wand. It didn't feel like magic waiting to explode. It felt like a tool waiting to be used. Ragnald gestured toward a slab of soft stone and pushed it in front of Harry. Right. Harry stared. I don't know runes. Ragnald's grin returned, cruel. Yes you do. Your eyes have been reading them for days. Now your hands will obey what your eyes already understand. He pointed to a simple symbol carved on another slate beside the stone. A stabilizing rune Harry had seen in ward patterns, used to equalize pressure, smooth flow. Copy, Ragnald said. Harry's fingers tightened around the stylus. He leaned over the soft stone and began tracing the rune carefully. The stylus didn't scratch like metal. It sang, a faint, high tone as it carved. Harry felt vibration up his arm, into his teeth. The rune line sank into the stone perfectly, clean and smooth. Harry blinked. He tried again. Second rune. Cleaner. Third. Better. Something in him relaxed, not emotionally, but mechanically. He could do this. He could learn this. Then he made a mistake. His stylus slipped slightly, just a hair, cutting a line too far, bending an angle wrong. The rune on the stone flared. And the stylus bit. A sharp jolt snapped through the tool and into Harry's hand. Like an electric sting. He yelped and dropped it. The stylus clattered on the table. Harry stared at his palm. A thin line of blood had appeared where the tool's edge had jumped. Griphook didn't rush. He didn't soothe. He simply watched. Ragnald's voice was flat. Tools correct sloppiness. Harry's throat tightened. It hurt. Ragnald's eyes narrowed like Harry had confessed something embarrassing. Of course it hurt. He leaned in. Pain is a ledger entry. You made a mistake. The tool recorded it in blood so you will not repeat it. Harry's hands shook, and anger rose again, anger at the deep. Anger at being used, anger at having pain treated like a lesson. The scar pulsed. Hard. For a second, Harry heard a whisper inside his skull, not words, but pleasure. Like something smiling at the idea of violence. Harry's stomach twisted. He clenched his bleeding palm and forced his eyes onto the stone rune. He started counting. 1, 2, 3. The whisper faded. The knot retreated. Frustrated, Ragnald watched him, eyes gleaming. Good, he said softly. Now you understand discipline. Harry's voice came out raw. So that thing, in my scar, it likes when I'm angry. Griphook's expression turned sharp. It likes when you're unstable. Ragnald nodded. Anger is power without shape. A tool wants shape. A curse anchor wants chaos. He pointed at the rune Harry had botched. You will shape yourself before it shapes you. Harry swallowed, picked up the stylus again, and returned to the stone. This time, he carved slowly. He carved perfectly. When the lesson ended, Ragnald placed the finished stylus on the table between them like it was a verdict. This, he said, is your first focus tool. Harry stared at it, exhausted and strangely proud despite himself. Ragnald's voice stayed cold. Do not worship it. Do not name it. Do not pretend it is a friend. It is a function. He tapped Harry's marked palm. Just like you are a function. Harry flinched. Ragnald's eyes bored into him. But functions improve. He turned to Griphook. Tomorrow, he goes lower. Harry's stomach dropped. Lower. Griphook's smile was thin. Training vault. Ragnald nodded. A vault that eats mistakes. Harry's hand tightened around the stylus until the dragon bone bit his skin. A vault. A real one. Not a practice slab. Not a controlled ward. A place where the stone didn't care if he was a child. Ragnald leaned in one last time, voice like gravel. Bring your tool, he said. Bring your numbers. Bring your discipline. His eyes flicked briefly to Harry's scar. And bring your cage, he added. Because if that knot wakes fully in a vault. He smiled, sharp and joyless. It won't be the vault that kills you first. They didn't wake him. They arrived. The stone door to Harry's sleeping cell slid open with a quiet, final sound, and cold air rolled in like a judgment. Harry jolted upright, heart hammering, hand L ready on his ward band as if it could stop the world from taking him again. Griphook stood in the doorway. Behind him, two goblins waited with the stillness of knives. Up, Griphook said. Harry swallowed. His mouth tasted like stale fear. He climbed off the bed and forced his shaking legs to obey. He grabbed his first focus tool, his silver and bone stylus, from the shelf like it was the only real thing he owned. Griphook's eyes flicked to it. Good, he said, and for Griphook that was practically a lullaby. They walked deeper. The corridors narrowed. The amber rune lights grew farther apart. The air cooled until it felt thin, sharp, designed to cut weakness away. The stone under Harry's feet changed from smooth to ridged, the floor carved with traction grooves like the bank expected blood and wanted it to drain neatly. Harry kept his eyes forward. But his vision kept catching the hidden structure, rune seams in the walls, pressure lines under the tracks, a faint lattice of containment wards that grew thicker as they descended. It wasn't just deeper. It was older. Finally, they reached a door that looked like the mouth of something patient. It wasn't marble. It wasn't polished bank stone. It was raw iron, thick as a tree trunk, its surface etched with thousands of tiny runes like a skin of scars. No handle, no hinge, just a circular depression in the center, like a palm had been pressed into hot metal and left its shape forever. Ragnald waited there. He didn't look at Harry at first. He was speaking to another goblin, tall for their kind, with one eye cloud. D-white and a long notch cut through his left ear. That goblin wore a belt of tools that made Harry's stomach tighten with need. Chisels, wedges, a small hammer, a coil of rune wire. When Ragnald finished, he turned his dark eyes on Harry. Harry's throat tightened. You brought your stylus, Ragnald said. Harry nodded. Ragnald's gaze dropped to Harry's wrist. The ward band was warm, steady, almost smug. In your cage, Ragnald added. Harry's hand twitched toward the scar without thinking. Ragnald's voice cut like metal. Do not touch it. Harry froze. Ragnald stepped closer until Harry could smell him. Stone. Iron. Something like burnt ink. This vault, Ragnald said, was built to teach humility. Harry swallowed. It's a training vault. Griphook answered from behind him. A retired client vault. Harry blinked. Ragnald's lips curled slightly. A client who thought they could outsmart goblins. He lifted his hand and placed his palm into the depression. The runes flared. Not bright, deep. The iron door vibrated. Harry's teeth ached. Then the door opened with a sound like a creature exhaling. Cold rushed out. Not air cold. Grave cold. Harry felt it in his bones. His ward band warmed instantly to compensate, but the cold still reached inside him, slipping past skin and into memory. Cupboard cold. Winter cold. The kind of cold that made you feel like the world had forgotten you existed. Ragnald glanced at Harry's face and made a small sound of satisfaction. Yes, he murmured. It knows you. Harry's stomach twisted. What knows me? Ragnald didn't answer directly. He gestured at the cloud-eyed goblin. This is Skarn. Skarn's one clear eye assessed Harry like he was evaluating a faulty hinge. He's small, Skarn said flatly. Griphook's tone held faint amusement. Small fits into cracks. Skarn snorted. Small also bleeds easier. Ragnald's voice stayed calm. He bleeds like everyone else. Then he looked at Harry again. Listen carefully. You are not here to prove courage. You are here to prove function. Harry's fingers tightened around his stylus. Ragnald nodded at the open doorway. Inside are 3 layers of wardwork and 1 curse knot. The knot feeds on the intruder. Not on flesh. Harry's breath hitched. Feeds on fear, Griphook said, almost casually. Skarn tapped his belt of tools. Men go in thinking fear is weakness. They try to crush it. The vault eats them. Harry's skin prickled. His scar pulsed faintly like it liked the word fear. Ragnald's eyes sharpened. Count. Harry swallowed and began automatically. Under his breath. 1, 2, 3. The pulse slowed. Ragnald's gaze approved. Good, he said. Your job is simple. You will map the first ward layer and identify the anchor line. Skarn will cut. Griphook will observe. I will decide if you live. Harry stared at him, horrified. Ragnald didn't blink. That is mercy, he said. Most vaults do not announce their intentions. He stepped aside and gestured. Enter, he ordered. Harry's legs felt like stone, but he moved anyway. Because down here, choice was measured in consequences. He crossed the threshold. The iron door did not close behind him. It waited, like it knew he might need to run. Inside, the vault corridor sloped downward. The walls were smooth, but not friendly smooth. The Saint. One had been shaved into perfect angles that made the world feel wrong, like a place built by hands that didn't care about human comfort. Amber runes glowed faintly along the floor. Harry's eyes narrowed. The runes weren't decorative. They were watching. The moment he stepped forward, the air changed. Not colder. Thicker. Like the vault had swallowed and was deciding how to digest him. Rhee's vision flickered, the lattice of ward lines snapped into view, thin and complex, spiraling around the corridor like invisible vines. His heart thudded. He looked down at his stylus. It vibrated faintly. Griphook's voice came from behind him. Do not rush. Skarn grunted. If he rushes, he learns fast. Harry swallowed and forced himself to slow. He walked like he was reading. Because he was. The first ward layer was a grid, simple in design, brutal in execution. It laid pressure across the corridor like an invisible hand, testing weight distribution, balance, intent. Human wards often felt like walls. Goblin wards felt like math problems waiting to punish arrogance. Harry's eyes traced the geometry. A triangle brace here, a looped siphon line there. A delicate seam that looked wrong. He stopped. Skarn bumped his shoulder slightly. Why stop? Harry's voice came out thin. The resonance changes. Skarn's eye narrowed. Where? Harry lifted the stylus and hovered it near the wall without touching. The vibration in his teeth dipped near a point where 3 lines met, an anchor junction. But the junction wasn't clean. It was overfed. The lines pulsed faintly, like something was sucking from them. Harry's stomach tightened. Anchor, he whispered, more to himself than anyone. But it's being drained. Griphook's voice was low. Say it properly. Harry swallowed. The anchor line is not holding pressure. It's feeding something else. Skarn's mouth curled in rough approval. Good. Where does it feed? Harry's eyes flicked along the ward lines. He followed the drain like a river, tracing it deeper into the corridor where the ward lattice thickened into a knot, dense, tangled, ugly. And inside that knot, he felt it. Not a voice. A sensation. Lick. The vault was leaning closer to smell him. Harry's scar pulsed hard. For a heartbeat, a whisper of pleasure curled through his skull. Harry's vision blurred. He stumbled. Skarn's hand shot out. and caught him by the collar before he hit the stone. Control it, Scarn snarled. Harry's breath came fast. The corridor felt like it was narrowing, the air pressing in, the stone remembering every time he'd been trapped. Cupboard. Door. Dark. Silence. He almost panicked. Almost. Then he counted. 1, 2, 3. The ward band warmed like a steady hand on his wrist. The pulse in the scar slowed, still hungry. Still present, but caged behind numbers. Harry swallowed the urge to bolt and forced his eyes back to the lattice. The fear feeder knot wasn't just feeding on fear. It was provoking it. The ward grid wasn't designed just to stop intruders, it was designed to make them feel trapped, to press old memories into their throats until fear rose naturally. And then it drank. Harry's fingers tightened around his stylus. He looked at the knot again, really looked. The knot had a rhythm. It pulsed in cycles, pressure build, squeeze, emotional spike, siphon. If it was a mechanism, it could be interrupted. Harry's voice came out hoarse. It's not just a ward. Scarn grunted. No, it's a system, Harry said. A loop. It needs fear spikes to feed. Griphook's tone carried faint interest. And how do you starve a loop? Harry's throat tightened. How did you stop fear? He couldn't stop fear. Fear was what had kept him alive. But he could. He could change the input. Ragnald's voice drifted from behind them, calm as stone. Speak, Keth. Harry flinched at the name, but he spoke anyway. It uses fear as fuel. If we dampen the fear response, if we stabilize the resonance, then it won't get the spike. Scarn's eye narrowed. Dampen with what? Harry glanced down. Basalt dampened magic. Basalt could mute resonance. But they didn't have basalt in the corridor. Unless. His eyes flicked to the floor. The amber runes along the ground were embedded in basalt strips. The floor itself was part of the system. Harry swallowed. The floor. Scarn's grin showed teeth. Now you're thinking like a thief. Griphook's voice was satisfied. Now you're thinking like a goblin. Harry crouched. He ran his stylus tip lightly over the floor rune strip. The vibration changed, steady, controlled. Like the basalt was already suppressing wild magic. If he could rewrite the floor runes. Not destroy. Not cut. Just add a stabilizing operator to flatten the emotional spike. Harry's hands shook. A mistake here wouldn't sting like the stylus had before. It would get him eaten. He counted under his breath. 1, 2, 3. Then he placed the stylus tip into a groove beside the floor rune and began to carve. A small stabilizing rune. Not too large. Not aggressive. A gentle function that equalized flow. His stylus sang. The line went in clean. The rune settled into the basalt like it belonged there. For a second, nothing happened. Then the air shifted. The corridor's oppressive pressure eased just a fraction, like a hand unclenched. Harry's shoulders dropped slightly without meaning to. The fear feeder knot deeper ahead pulsed. And sputtered. Harry's eyes widened. Scarn let out a short, approving sound. Again, Harry swallowed and moved forward. Carving the same stabilizing rune at the next floor segment, then the next, creating a chain of dampeners. Each rune smoothed the air. Each rune flattened the vault's attempt to squeeze fear out of them. The knot ahead began to pulse more erratically, like a starving thing. And that's when it fought back. The corridor lights flickered. The amber runes dimmed. The air thickened again, heavier than before, like the vault was angry. Harry's scar burned. A whisper curled through his skull, hot, delighted. His vision flickered. And suddenly, for a heartbeat, he wasn't in the corridor. He was back under the stairs. Dark. Small. Petunia's voice above him like a blade. Vernon's footsteps like thunder. Dudley laughing. The cupboard door closing. Harry's throat tightened so hard he couldn't breathe. The vault seized that moment. The fear feeder knot surged. The ward lattice snapped tight like a net. Harry felt something invisible wrap around his ribs, pressure, crushing. Squeezing breath out of him. His stylus slipped from his fingers. It clattered on the stone. Harry gasped. No air. Scarn cursed in gobbledygook and lunged forward with a silver wedge in hand. But the ward net slapped him back like an invisible wall. Griphook's voice came sharp. Keth, count. Harry tried. The numbers wouldn't come. The cupboard memory was too loud. The knot in his scar pulsed harder. Like it was drinking the chaos and smiling. Harry's eyes watered. He clawed at his throat uselessly. The ward net tightened. Then, a warmth flared at his wrist. The ward band. Not soothing. Not gentle. A hard warmth, like a clamp locking onto a moving part. Runes on the band lit in a sequence: containment, stabilization, override. Harry's body jerked, as the band forced his breathing rhythm into order. In, out, not choice, command. Harry's mind latched onto it like a drowning person grabbing a rope. He forced the numbers out on the exhale. 1, 2, 3. The cupboard vision cracked. The ward net loosened slightly, frustrated. Harry's voice grew stronger with each count. 4, 5, 6. The knot in the scar recoiled like it didn't like being caged. The whisper turned angry. Harry didn't care. He seized his stylus with shaking fingers and, without thinking too much, carved a stabilizing rune directly into the basalt strip at his feet, deeper, stronger. More decisive. The stylus bit the stone. The rune flared. The corridor exhaled violently. The ward net snapped, and dissolved into mist. Harry collapsed onto his hands and knees, coughing hard. Sucking in air like it was the first time he'd ever tasted it. Scarn stepped over him and slammed his silver wedge into the wall seam Harry had identified earlier, the anchor drain line. He didn't hack. He cut. One precise strike. The wall seam flashed. A thin, ugly thread of wardlight snapped like a tendon. The fear feeder knot screamed, not sound, but pee. Reassure, then collapsed in on itself like a starving thing choking on nothing. The corridor lights steadied. The air became ordinary cold again. Harry lay there shaking, sweat on his face, his scar burning like it was furious. Grippick crouched beside him. He didn't touch. He didn't comfort. He simply observed, like checking a tool for cracks. You froze, Grippick said quietly. Harry's voice was broken. I saw. Scarn snorted. Memories. Ragnald stepped into view, calm as ever, as if watching a child almost suffocate was no more dramatic than watching metal cool. He looked down at Harry. You let it get inside your head, Ragnald said. Harry swallowed shame and rage. It was fear, Ragnald corrected. And fear is data, not weakness, not shame. Data. Harry blinked. Ragnald leaned in. You made a mistake. Harry flinched. And then, Ragnald continued, you corrected it. Harry stared at him, chest heaving. Ragnald's mouth twitched, almost approving. That is the only kind of survival that matters. Scarn reached down, grabbed Harry by the back of his collar, and hauled him upright like a sack. Harry's feet wobbled. Scarn shoved a small flask into his hands. Harry opened it and drank without thinking. The liquid was bitter and hot, like iron and herbs. Warmth spread through his chest, steadying his shaking limbs. Stamina tonic, Scarn said. Don't waste it. Harry wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. His gaze drifted down the corridor toward where the knot had been. Gone. The vault felt quieter now. Less alive, like a predator that had lost interest. Harry's stomach twisted. He'd done that. A part of him, a cold, precise part, felt satisfaction. And another part of him, small, human, terrified, felt sick. Ragnald watched the war on Harry's face and nodded, as if this too was a lesson. You starved it, Ragnald said. You did not fight it. You did not overpower it. You removed its fuel. Harry's voice came out hoarse. It tried to make me remember. Griphook's eyes gleamed faintly. Most curse knots do. Scarn tilted his head. The best traps do not stab. They invite. Harry swallowed hard. Ragnald's gaze flicked to Harry's scar. In your foreign anchor, it enjoyed the instability. Harry's hand twitched toward his forehead. Ragnald's voice sharpened. Do not touch it. Harry froze. Ragnow. Eldie's tone softened only slightly, still stone, but less knife. That thing will whisper to you in moments like this. It will tell you chaos is freedom. It will tell you rage is power. Harry's stomach churned as he remembered the whisper, hot, delighted. Ragnald leaned closer. But you saw the truth, didn't you? Harry swallowed. The truth, Ragnald said, is that chaos makes you predictable. Predictable things get used. Harry's throat tightened. Ragnald straightened. He turned to Scarn. We're done. Scarn grunted. Grippick nodded. They began walking back toward the iron door. Harry followed on unsteady legs, still tasting metal, still hearing his own ragged breathing echo off stone. As they reached the threshold, Harry glanced back one last time. The corridor looked ordinary now, just stone and runes and cold. But Harry knew what it had tried to do. He knew what it had tasted. He knew it had wanted his fear the way Dudley wanted his sweets. And he denied it. The iron door swung open as they approached, as if acknowledging the completion of a transaction. They stepped out into the broader chamber. The door sealed behind them. Ragnald didn't speak immediately. He walked to Skarn's tool belt and plucked a small item from it, a thin silver wedge, the kind used for precise ward cutting. He held it between two fingers like a coin. Then he held it out to Harry. Harry stared. Skarn's eye widened slightly. Griphook's mouth twitched. Harry's hands trembled as he reached out. Ragnald didn't let go immediately. "Do you know what this is?" Ragnald asked. Harry swallowed. "A wedge." Ragnald nodded. "A wedge is not a sword. It does not win by force. It wins by understanding where the world is weakest." His gaze pinned Harry. "That is what you are." Harry's throat tightened. Ragnald released the wedge into Harry's palm. It was heavier than it looked. Cold. Real. A tool allotment. A reward in the only language the deep respected. Griphook spoke softly beside him. "You earned it." Skarn snorted. "He almost died." Griphook's eyes gleamed. "Yes. And he didn't." Harry closed his fingers around the wedge, feeling its edge. Bite lightly into his skin. Not enough to cut, just enough to remind him it was honest. Ragnald turned away as if the moment was over. "Eat," he ordered. "Sleep. Tomorrow, you will break harder things." Harry's stomach dropped. "Tomorrow." Ragnald glanced back over his shoulder. His eyes were dark and utterly certain. "Vaults do not stop being dangerous because you survived one," he said. "And neither does the thing in your scar." Then he walked away, cloak whispering against stone. Griphook paused just long enough to look at Harry. Not kindly. But not indifferently either. "You starved a fear feeder," Griphook said. "Most surface curse breakers never even realize they are being eaten until their bones." Harry swallowed, gripping his wedge. Griphook's voice lowered. "Do not let that make you proud." Harry's chest tightened. "Why not?" Griphook's smile was thin as wire. "Because pride tastes like fear to smarter traps." He turned and followed Ragnald. Skarn lingered a heartbeat longer. He leaned down, one eye hard. "You froze," he said again. Harry flinched. Skarn's tone shifted, not softer, just less blunt. "Next time, you won't." Then he walked away too. Harry stood alone in the chamber for a moment, staring at the silver wedge in his hand and the rune mark on his palm. Keth. A wedge. A breaker. He thought about the cupboard. He thought about the vault net tightening around his ribs. He thought about the whisper in his skull that had smiled when he panicked. And he made a decision, quiet, cold, and absolute. He would learn every mechanism in the world. He would learn every loop. Every anchor. Every hidden seam. Because if fear was fuel, then he would become the kind of person who could decide what burned, and what starved. Harry learned the deep had celebrations. They just didn't look like candles and cake. On the day after the vault that ate fear, Griphook led him through a corridor Harry had never walked before, one that rose instead of descended. The stone grew smoother. The air grew warmer. The rune lights shifted from amber to a cleaner white, less like torch glow and more like the cold certainty of a ledger. They were going up. Not to the surface. To the bank's spine. Harry clutched his silver wedge in one hand and his stylus in the other, because he didn't trust the deep to not steal things when he blinked. His ward band pulsed steady on his wrist, a quiet reminder that even his warmth was a managed resource. Griphook didn't speak until they reached a set of double doors made from dark wood banded in iron. Runes crawled along the bands like faint lightning. He stopped and looked down at Harry. "Today," Griphook said, "you will learn a new kind of curse." Harry's stomach tightened. "What kind?" Griphook's mouth twitched. "Surface politics." Before Harry could ask what that meant, the doors opened. The room beyond didn't look like a classroom. It looked like a throne room designed by accountants. A long table of black stone cut so cleanly it reflected the rune lights above. Chairs carved from ironwood. Walls lined with inset vault plates, thin panels of metal etched with treaty runes and old seals, like trophies that had teeth. And around the table sat goblins. Not workers. Not runners. Not tool belt goblins with stained hands. These goblins wore clean coats and rings and blade-thin smiles. Their ears were pierced with runic metal that hummed when they shifted. Their eyes weren't just sharp, they were patient, the way traps were patient. At the far end sat Ragnald. Still. Unmoved. Like a mountain that had decided to listen. And beside the table, standing awkwardly, Like she'd been dragged here and didn't want to admit it, stood a ministry witch with stiff shoulders and tighter lips. Harry recognized her, the observer from Privet Drive. Her eyes flicked to him, and something like discomfort crossed her face when she saw the ward band and the mark on his palm. Ragnald spoke first. Keth. Harry flinched at the name, but stepped forward. The goblins' gazes tracked him like he was an artifact being brought into the light for inspection. Ragnald's dark eyes flicked to Harry's wedge. You keep your tools close. Harry swallowed. Yes. One goblin laughed quietly, a sound like metal tapping stone. Ragnald didn't smile. Good. Tools do not betray you. People do. He gestured. And Grippick guided Harry to a place near the wall, not at the table, not as an equal. A position where he could be seen without being allowed to speak unless permitted. Harry understood the message without needing words. Asset. Observe. Do not interrupt the people who own the room. Ragnald's gaze shifted to the ministry witch. You will read, he said. Her jaw clenched. Again. I already. Ragnald lifted one hand, and the room's temperature dropped just slightly. The witch swallowed. Yes. Fine. A goblin slid a parchment across the table toward her. It wasn't sealed with wax. It was bound with a thin strip of gold stamped with the same rune Harry had seen at Privet Drive, the seal that made the air taste like pennies and old law. The witch's eyes moved as she read. And Harry watched her face change in real time, annoyance to confusion to dread. This is, she started. One of the goblins across the table spoke in English, smooth and cutting. Street. 8 your name and position for the record. The witch's nostrils flared. Daphne Crowley. DMLE liaison to the Wizengamot Oversight Office. Several goblins smiled at the word oversight like it was a joke. Crowley cleared her throat and continued reading aloud, voice strained. Gringotts Wizarding Bank hereby issues a formal notice of surface instability surrounding Harry James Potter. She glanced up briefly at Harry. Then looked back down quickly. The bank asserts that due to recent events and increased political pressure, the wardship arrangement must be adjusted for security. A goblin on the left leaned forward. Rings clinking softly. Define, adjusted. Crowley swallowed. It states that the ward will be placed under higher protective classification. That he will no longer be a passive ward. He will be designated as a. Her voice faltered. Ragnald's eyes narrowed slightly. Say it. Crowley forced the words out. A Gringotts diplomatic asset. The room went quiet for half a heartbeat. Harry's stomach dropped like the cart had taken a turn too fast. Asset. Not ward. Not child. A thing with a function. Ragnald's voice was calm. Continue. Crowley licked her lips. It also claims that the bank will present Harry Potter at Hogwarts under treaty protections, as a. She looked like she wanted to vomit. As a representative, she finished weakly. A liaison. A symbol of Gringotts sovereignty. Harry's hands tightened around his wedge until the edge bit his palm. Grippick leaned in slightly beside him, voice low. Do not bleed on the floor. It is rude. Harry swallowed and forced his grip to loosen. At the head of the table, another goblin spoke, older, with teeth too white and eyes too amused. And now, he said, the ministry has come to object. Crowley lifted her chin, finding her spine. Yes. The ministry, the Wizengamot, has concerns. The goblins waited politely. Crowley exhaled. Harry Potter is not an object to be traded. He is a citizen of magical Britain. A few goblins chuckled softly. Crowley pushed on. He is also a symbol. The public. A public is a herd, Ragnald said, voice like stone. And herds stampede. Crowley's cheeks reddened. The public will demand answers. They will demand access. They will demand to see him. A goblin across the table tilted his head. And you think giving them access makes them calmer? Crowley hesitated. The goblin smiled with predator patience. Humans mistake consumption for comfort. Ragnald leaned back slightly in his chair, hands steepled. State the ministry's actual fear. Crowley's jaw clenched. The fear is, Gringotts is, overreaching. The goblins' smiles widened. Ragnald's eyes gleamed. No. Crowley's voice rose despite herself. You are taking a child raised by humans. Neglected by humans, Grippick corrected quietly. Crowley flinched but continued, and shaping him into a political weapon. Ragnald's gaze flicked to Harry for the briefest moment. Then back to Crowley. Yes, he said simply. Crowley stared. The honesty shocked her more than any threat would have. Ragnald's voice stayed calm. Because the world is already shaping him into a weapon. The ministry shapes him with propaganda. Dumbledore shapes him with prophecy. Dark wizards shape him with obsession. He tapped one clawed finger against the table. Tick, tick. Gringotts will shape him with structure. Harry's throat tightened. Ragnald continued, unhurried. The question is not whether he is shaped. The question is who writes the clause. Crowley's voice was tight. Dumbledore will fight this. At the mention of that name, the air shifted again, subtle, like a threat entering the room. One goblin snorted. He already tried. He failed. We collected. Crowley's eyes darted to Harry again. He cares about the boy. Ragnald's expression didn't change. Caring is not a legal category. Harry's chest hurt. He didn't know Dumbledore. He didn't know if the old wizard had truly cared or if he just cared about what Harry represented. But hearing it dismissed so cleanly made something sharp twist inside him. The scar pulsed. A whisper stirred. Delighted at emotion. Harry's jaw clenched. He counted under his breath. 1, 2, 3. The pulse slowed. The whisper retreated, annoyed. Good. Ragnald's voice cut through the silence. Crowley. The ministry may lodge an objection. It will be recorded. It will be filed. It will be ignored. Crowley's shoulders tensed. You can't. We can, Ragnald said. Treaty law. Vault clauses. Sovereignty. He leaned forward slightly. You may also choose to cooperate and reduce public instability. That would be wise. Crowley's eyes narrowed. And if we don't cooperate? A different goblin, thin-lipped. Dangerous, answered. Bloodline audits. Crowley paled. Harry's stomach sank as he remembered Petunia's fear at those words. Crowley swallowed hard. You'd threaten half the Wizengamot with audits to get your way. Ragnald's eyes gleamed. We do not threaten. We predict. Humans steal from vaults. Humans lie on contracts. Humans hide inheritances. We simply shine light. Crowley's hands curled into fists. This is extortion. Griphic spoke softly. This is banking. The goblins chuckled again, smooth and unified. Crowley looked like she wanted to scream, but she didn't. Because she wasn't stupid. She was in a room where law was carved into stone, and she was standing in it wearing paper robes. Ragnald's gaze shifted to Harry then. For the first time, it felt like the room acknowledged he wasn't just a subject being discussed. He was a variable. Ragnald's voice was even. Keth, speak. Harry's mouth went dry. Griphook's whisper brushed his ear. Short, precise, no emotion. Harry swallowed and stepped forward half a pace, eyes lifting toward the table. Every goblin stared. Crowley stared too. Harry's heart pounded. He wanted to say, I don't want this. I'm a kid. I'm hungry and tired and I almost died in a vault. But those words wouldn't matter here. So he chose the words that did. What is my function? Harry asked. The goblins, smiles sharpened. Ragnald's eyes gleamed with quiet satisfaction. Good question. A goblin on the right answered first, voice slick. You will walk among humans and remind them that gold has teeth. Another said, you will be proof that Gringotts may claim what it safeguards. Another, colder, you will be a deterrent. Harry's hands clenched. His scar pulsed faintly, enjoying the rising tension. Harry counted silently. Ragnald raised one hand, and the room quieted again. You will do 3 things, Ragnald said. He held up one clawed finger. First, you will attend Hogwarts under treaty protections. You will observe the castle, its wards, its secrets. Hogwarts is old. Old things hide old mistakes. Second finger. Second, you will learn wand magic enough to understand how humans fight. Not to become them, to predict them. Third finger. Third, you will serve as liaison in negotiations where humans attempt to pressure Gringotts through your name. He leaned forward slightly. They will ask for you. They will demand you. They will try to adopt you, marry you, recruit you, martyr you. Harry's throat tightened at the word marry. Nonsense, horrifying. Ragnald's voice stayed cold. You will remember your clause. You are under wardship. You do not agree to anything without Gringotts. Harry swallowed. And if they try to take me? Ragnald smiled, sharp, joyless. Then, he said, they will learn what it means to steal from a vault that is awake. Harry's ward band warmed like it approved. Crowley looked sick. Harry looked down at his marked palm. Keth, wedge, breaker, a diplomatic asset. He forced himself to keep his voice steady. Do I have any choice? For the first time, a tiny ripple moved through the goblins, interest, not mockery. Ragnold studied Harry for a long moment. Then he said something Harry didn't expect. Yes. Harry blinked. Crowley blinked too. Ragnold's voice stayed calm. You have one choice. You may be a useful asset, or a useless one. Useless assets are stored. Useful assets are equipped. Harry's stomach tightened. Equipped meant tools, training, protection. Stored meant a shelf, a cell, a life spent as a silent coin in a vault. Harry's fingers tightened around his wedge. I'll be useful, he said quietly. Griphook's mouth twitched. Ragnold nodded once. Good. He turned slightly and spoke in gobbledygook, fast and harsh. Two goblins rose and left the room. Ragnold looked back at Harry. Now you will learn surface etiquette. Harry blinked. Etiquette. Griphook's voice was dry. How to insult people politely. Humans prefer it. A few goblins chuckled. Crowley looked like she wanted to leave her body and float away. Ragnold's gaze flicked to her. You will deliver the ministry's response by end of day. Crowley forced herself to nod. Yes. And, Ragnold added, almost casually, inform Dumbledore that Gringotts will be sending a formal envoy letter to Hogwarts. Crowley's face tightened. He won't accept. Ragnold's smile sharpened. He will read it. He leaned back in his chair, the matter settled. Meeting ends, Ragnold said. The goblins rose as one, smooth and silent. And the room's pressure eased like a trap resetting. Crowley stood frozen for a moment, then turned sharply and left without looking at Harry again. Griphook touched Harry lightly on the shoulder, not comfort. Just direction. Come. They didn't take him back down. They took him sideways, into a suite of rooms that looked like they belonged in a surface mansion, if a surfac. Mansion had been designed by someone who hated softness. There was a mirror. Harry had never had a mirror. He stared at it like it might attack. Griphook watched him. You will learn how humans see you. Harry's reflection looked wrong. Too thin. Too pale. Eyes too big. Hair too messy. Scar too obvious. And on his wrist, the ward band sat like a cuff. On his palm, the rune mark looked like a bruise shaped by law. A goblin in clean clothes entered carrying folded fabric. A black robe cut differently than Hogwarts robes, sharper, with subtle silver stitching that traced runes along the hem. Where? Griphook ordered. Harry hesitated. Why? Griphook's eyes narrowed. Because humans fear what looks expensive. Harry swallowed and changed awkwardly behind a screen. When he stepped out, the robe fit perfectly. Like it had been made from measurements taken without asking. Griphook circled him once, inspecting. Better, he said. Harry's throat tightened. I'm going to Hogwarts. Griphook didn't deny it. Yes. Harry's stomach churned with something unfamiliar, anticipation mixed with dread. He'd heard the word Hogwarts whispered in the deep like a location, not a dream. A castle full of children. A school. A place where people might talk to him without calculating his market value. Or a place full of traps. And Dumbledore. Griphook handed him a thin booklet made of stiff leather. Harry took it. On the cover, in clean English, it read, Gringotts Liaison Protocols, Surface Operations. Harry's fingers tightened around it. Griphook's voice dropped low. You will be watched. By the school. By the ministry. By Dumbledore. By those who loved your parents. By those who murdered them. Harry's scar pulsed faintly at the word murdered. Harry counted silently. Griphook's eyes flicked to Harry's forehead as if he noticed the pulse, then back to Harry's eyes. Do not let them decide who you are, Griphook said. Harry swallowed. Who am I? Griphook's mouth twitched, not quite amused. Not quite grim. You are a vault that walks, he said softly. And everyone you meet will try to open you. Harry's skin prickled. Griphook reached into his coat and produced an envelope. Thick parchment. Sealed with something that wasn't wax. A thin strip of gold, stamped with Gringotts, rune seal. He held it out to Harry. Harry stared at it, heart thudding. What is it? Griphook's eyes gleamed like black coins. Your letter, he said. Not from Hogwarts. Harry's fingers closed around the envelope. The gold seal was cold. Heavy. Real. Griphook leaned in slightly. Voice a whisper like stone sliding. This is the first time the surface will see you, he murmured. Do not smile like a child. Do not glare like a threat. Do not beg like a victim. Harry's mouth went dry. What should I do? Griphook's smile was thin and sharp. Negotiate, he said. Harry stared down at the gold-sealed envelope, the weight of it settling into his palm like a coin that could buy, or break, his future. And deep inside his skull, the foreign knot pulsed once, faintly curious. As if it, too, wanted to see what kind of weapon Gringotts had made. The surface had too much sky. Harry noticed it the moment Grippick brought him up through Gringotts' public hall. Not through the secret doors this time, but through marble and chandeliers and staring wizards. It was deliberate. A message. Look, Gringotts is not hiding the boy. Gringotts is holding him. Outside, London was loud in a way the deep never was. Carriages. Feet. Voices layered over voices, all messy and emotional and unmeasured. The air tasted damp and human. Harry kept his hands close, stylus in his pocket, wedge tucked inside his robe sleeve, ward band warm on his wrist like a silent guard. Grippick didn't walk beside him like a friend. He walked beside him like a lock. At King's Cross Station, the crowd moved like water around stones. Harry followed Grippick through it, eyes flicking automatically to exits, corners. Pressure points. The habit of survival didn't vanish just because the ceiling was higher. They stopped near the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. Families hurry deep past it without seeing anything strange, and that alone made Harry's skin prickle. A barrier that hid itself from most eyes wasn't a wall. It was a ward, a casual one, the kind humans used every air because they liked pretending the world belonged to them. Grippick watched Harry's gaze settle on the barrier and spoke quietly in English. "Do not run." Harry didn't answer. He didn't need to. A goblin he hadn't seen before stepped forward, taller, dressed in severe black, with silver stitchwork along his cuffs that formed a treaty pattern Harry recognized from the walls of the council chamber. This one wasn't a worker. He was official. "Envoy Karst," Grippick said, nodding once. Karst's eyes flicked over Harry with a sharpness that felt like counting. "Ward intact. Band stable. Mark recorded." Harry hated the way they spoke about him like a ledger entry. Karst turned slightly, facing the barrier. He raised 2 fingers and traced a small rune in the air, clean, precise. Not wandwork, toolwork without a tool, as if his skin itself was the instrument. The barrier shivered. For a heartbeat, Harry saw it clearly, a thin film of illusion and neglect, a soft spell wrapped around brick like a blanket. Karst spoke one word in gobbledygook. The ward parted like it respected the accent. "Proceed," Karst ordered. Harry stepped forward. He didn't run into the barrier the way the other children did in stories. He walked through like entering a vault line after verification, calm, measured, aware that walls could bite. The world shifted. The noise changed pitch. The air tasted sharper. People who hadn't been there a second ago suddenly were. Owls, trunks, steam, a scarlet train that looked too bold to be real. Platform 9 3/4. The Hogwarts Express. Harry's eyes narrowed automatically. Big things, especially old, celebrated things, were never just what they looked like. He saw it again, the lattice. Not faint, not fleeting, dense. The platform was webbed with layered enchantments, anti-muggle concealment, crowd control, minor wards to prevent theft, a dozen small spells woven together like thread. And under them all, deeper, older, was AF. Foundation enchantment that felt like Hogwarts. Breath had touched this place centuries ago and never let go. Harry's teeth ached. Grippick's voice was low. "Do not stare." Harry forced his gaze down. But his mind kept mapping. A cluster of wizards noticed them. Their eyes snagged on Harry's scar first, then on the goblins with him, then on the rune-stitched robe that didn't match any Hogwarts house color. Whispers began instantly. "The boy, Harry Potter. Why is he with Gringotts?" Harry's scar pulsed faintly, like the foreign knot enjoyed attention. Harry counted silently. 1, 2, 3. The pulse slowed. Good. A tall, bearded man in a worn coat approached, pink-faced, kind-eyed, and unmistakably unsure how to behave in front of goblins. He looked like he'd been built or carrying heavy things and worrying about them. Rubeus Hagrid. Harry didn't know his name, but he knew the type. Warm, big, emotional. The opposite of the deep. Hagrid stared at Harry like he'd been holding an image in his heart for years and couldn't reconcile it with what stood before him. "Harry?" Hagrid asked, voice thick. Is that yay?" Harry's body went still. He didn't know this man. But the man knew him. Before Harry could answer, Karst stepped half a pace forward, subtle, but absolute. "State your business." Hagrid blinked, startled. I'm here, fair Harry. I was supposed tear, Professor Dumbledore said. At the mention of that name, the air seemed to tighten. Harry felt it before he saw it, a presence approaching like sunlight filtered through glass. Albus Dumbledore moved through the crowd with practiced ease, as if the platform itself made room for him. His eyes found Harry instantly, and there it was again, gentle sorrow, deliberate calm. A man who knew how to look like safety. Harry watched him the way he watched wards, for scenes. Harry, Dumbledore said softly. It is good to see you. Harry didn't answer immediately. Because Gringotts' protocols had been clear. Because emotions were expensive. Because Dumbledore's voice sounded too much like a story meant to make children lower their guard. Grippic spoke instead, voice cold as coin. Headmaster. Dumbledore's gaze shifted to the goblins, polite. Grippic. And Envoy Karst, Karst supplied without warmth. By treaty, we accompany our ward to Hogwarts and establish liaison terms for his presence. Dumbledore's smile didn't falter, but Harry saw the microscopic stiffening around his eyes. You needn't, Dumbledore said gently. Hogwarts is safe. Karst tilted his head. Define, safe. Dumbledore's tone remained calm. Protected. Griphook's voice was dry. Protected by human intention. Dumbledore's eyes returned to Harry. Harry, may I speak with you privately? Just a moment. Harry felt every gaze tighten around him. Hagrid's hope, Dumbledore's expectation, the crowd's hunger, the goblins' patience like drawn blades. Harry looked at Dumbledore, then at Griphook. Griphook didn't nod. He didn't shake his head. He simply watched Harry as if measuring whether the asset understood the rules. Harry chose. I will speak, Harry said, voice small but steady, with witnesses. Dumbledore's smile thinned almost invisibly. Hagrid blinked, confused. Karst's mouth twitched, approval, sharp and fleeting. Dumbledore inclined his head. Very well. He stepped closer. Careful not to invade. You have been, well treated? Dumbledore asked, and the question carried too much beneath it. Harry heard the real question. Are you being used? Harry almost laughed. He didn't. I have been trained, Harry answered. Dumbledore's eyes flicked to Harry's wrist. The ward band. The rune mark. I see, Dumbledore murmured. Harry, you must understand. There are those who will try to influence you. To claim you. To turn you against. Everyone claims, Harry said before he could stop himself. The platform seemed to hush for half a heartbeat. Dumbledore's expression softened further. Like pain. You are not a thing to be claimed. Harry's scar pulsed faintly, amused. Harry counted. 1, 2, 3. I am a ward, Harry said flatly. And a liaison. Dumbledore held his gaze. And Harry felt something like a test pressing against him. Not a spell, not obvious, but the way certain people looked at you as if trying to see what you were made of. Harry stayed still. He thought of vault nets tightening around his ribs. He thought of fear being siphoned. He didn't flinch. Dumbledore exhaled quietly. Hogwarts can still be home, Harry. Not a vault. Not a weapon. A place where you may be, a child. Harry didn't know how to respond to that. Because the deep had never let him be one. Because the idea of home sounded like a myth people sold to keep you obedient. Griphook stepped in, voice cutting through softness. Time. Dumbledore's gaze flicked to him. Of course. He looked back at Harry. We will speak again. I promise. Harry didn't promise anything back. Dumbledore turned toward Hagrid. Hagrid, please see the first years settled. Hagrid nodded automatically, still staring at Harry like he didn't know where to put his hands. Karst turned sharply. Proceed to the train. Gringotts will take the last compartment. The last, Hagrid began, but Griphook's gaze stopped him cold. Harry walked toward the train with the goblins behind him. The crowd parting as if afraid their curiosity might get cut. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He could feel the weight of Dumbledore's eyes on his spine like a warm hand trying to steer him. The last compartment smelled like old wood and steam and iron. Griphook checked the locks. Karst traced a small rune on the doorframe. The compartment's air steadied, as if the space had been claimed. Then, only then, did they allow Harry to sit. Harry stared out the window as the platform began to slide away. Families hugged. Children laughed. A boy with bright red hair struggled with a trunk. Cheeks flushed. A girl with bushy hair lectured someone about something, hands moving quickly. A pale boy with sharp features preened while his mother adjusted his collar like he was royalty. Harry watched it all like observing a foreign market. Human warmth, human noise, human chaos. The train jerked forward. London blurred. Fields appeared. The sky stayed too big. Karst spoke without looking at Harry. At Hogwarts, you will follow Protocol 6. Harry turned. Which is? Grippic answered. Do not agree to favors. Do not sign anything. Do not accept blood-based gifts. Harry swallowed. Blood-based. Karst's eyes narrowed. Wizard families will try to bind you with tradition. Gifts are often hooks. Harry's fingers tightened around his wedge inside his sleeve. He understood hooks. Karst continued. You will also carry a wand. Harry blinked. I thought. You will carry a wand, Karst repeated. Surface compliance. You will learn their method enough to predict it. Grippic produced a long box from inside his coat and slid it across the compartment like a banker offering terms. Harry stared at it, throat tight. Slowly, he opened it. Inside lay a wand. It wasn't decorated. It wasn't pretty. It looked plain. But the wood had been cut with unnatural precision, and a thin band of goblin silver ringed the handle, etched with stabilizing runes so small they were almost invisible. It was a compromise made by someone who hated compromise. Harry lifted it. The moment his fingers closed around the wood, the wand responded, warmth, a faint hum. Like a living thing waking. His scar pulsed once, curious. Harry counted automatically. The pulse slowed. Karst watched him closely. Do not rely on it. Harry nodded. He didn't trust it, but he would learn it. Because knowledge was leverage. And leverage kept you alive. Night fell before the train reached Hogsmeade. Harry watched the darkness outside and felt something strange in his chest, anticipation mixed with suspicion. The deep had trained him to treat new places like traps. Hogwarts was ancient. Ancient meant layered. Layered meant mistakes. The compartment door slid open without a knock. A boy stood there, pale and sharp as a knife, wearing arrogance like a tailored coat. Draco Malfoy. Harry didn't know his name yet, but he recognized the express. Russian. The look of someone who had never been hungry. Draco's eyes flicked to Harry's scar, then down to the goblin silver at Harry's cuff, and his lip curled. So it's true, Draco said, voice dripping with insult disguised as curiosity. You've been kept by goblins. Karst rose instantly. Draco's eyes widened slightly at the goblin standing to full height. Griphook's voice was smooth. State your name and purpose. Draco swallowed, then recovered, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Draco Malfoy. I only came to see. To stare, Griphook corrected. Draco's cheeks flushed. To welcome him. I mean, Harry Potter. Everyone's talking. And father says. Karst's tone was razor calm. Your father says many things. Most are attempts. Draco bristled. Excuse me. Harry stood slowly. Not aggressively. Deliberately. He looked at Draco the way he looked at wards, as a structure built from pride and expectation. You came, Harry said, voice flat, to test whether I am yours to recruit. Draco blinked. Thrown off script. What? Harry tilted his head slightly. You're early. That's good. It means you don't hide your hooks. Draco's mouth opened and closed. I'm not. Griphook spoke softly. Keth. Quote. Harry felt the rune on his palm warm. He kept his eyes on Draco. I don't do favors, Harry said. I don't do family invitations. And I don't do insults disguised as welcome. Draco's face went pink with anger. You think you can talk to me like that? Harry's scar pulsed faintly, amused. Harry counted. Then he said, very quietly, yes. The silence after that wasn't dramatic. It was clean. Draco stared at him, something uncertain flickering under his arrogance, because Harry hadn't threatened him like a Gryffindor would. Harry had spoken like a contract refusing terms. Draco's eyes flicked briefly to the goblins, then back to Harry. He forced a sneer. Fine. Enjoy being their pet. He turned and stalked away, slamming the compartment door. Karst exhaled through his nose. Good. You rejected the hook. Harry's stomach twisted. Was that a hook? Griphook's eyes gleamed. Everything is. Hogsmeade arrived in a blur of lantern light and cold air. The first years gathered, shivering in cloaks, chattering with nervous excitement. Harry stood among them like a different species. Whispers followed him like flies. That's him. Harry Potter. Why's his robe like that? Are those goblins? A stern witch with tight lips and sharper eyes approached the group. Professor McGonagall. Her gaze landed on Harry and the goblins beside him, and her expression tightened into the kind of politeness people used when forced to swallow anger. Mr. Potter, she said crisply. Welcome to Hogwarts. Harry looked at her and felt the castle behind her like a giant sleeping beast. Wards layered over wards, ancient enchantments stacked like sediment. He could almost hear them. Thank you, Harry said, because protocol demanded it. McGonagall's gaze flicked to Griphook. I was not informed you would be attending the sorting. Griphook's smile was thin. Treaty provision. McGonagall's jaw clenched, but she turned back to the children. First years, follow me. They entered the castle, and Harry's world lit up. Not with candles, with structure. The walls weren't just stone. They were engraved history. Every corridor was reinforced with enchantments that had been patched, altered, layered. Some spells were smooth and old, like masterwork vault doors. Others were newer, clumsy repairs, like someone had tried to fix a crack with glue and prayer. Harry's teeth ached as he walked. He could see seams. Hogwarts was a masterpiece. And a minefield. They reached the Great Hall. Candles floated like stars. The ceiling showed a night sky. Hundreds of students watched the first years with curiosity and hunger. At the front sat teachers. Dumbledore sat at the center, serene, watching Harry as if the boy were a story returning to the page. Harry stared back without flinching. A stool sat before them. And on it, an old, battered sorting hat. It looked harmless. That made Harry suspicious. He stared at the hat and felt it. Not just enchantment. An intelligence. A probing mechanism. A sentient artifact designed to crawl into minds and categorize. A curse trap dressed in tradition. Griphook murmured beside him, so low only Harry could hear, do not resist too violently. Humans panic when their rituals break. Harry swallowed. McGonagall unrolled a parchment. When I call your name, you will come forward, sit. And the sorting hat will place you in your house. Names began. Children walked. Sat. The hat whispered. Houses cheered. Harry watched the process like an audit. The hat didn't just read personalities. It measured potential. It tugged at fears. It probed ambitions. It wasn't harmful, mostly. But it was invasive. Harry's scar pulsed faintly as if it liked the idea of something digging into his head. Harry counted under his breath. Finally. Potter, Harry. The hall went so quiet it felt staged. Harry walked forward. Each step felt like walking into a ward circle. He sat on the stool. McGonagall lowered the hat onto his head. The world went dark, cloth and dust and old magic. And then the hat spoke in his mind, voice dry and ancient. Well, a pause like a finger tapping a table. This is new. Harry didn't answer with words. He answered the way the deep had taught him, by holding still and letting his mind become a grid. You have locks, the hat mused. And keys. And, oh, contracts. Harry's scar burned slightly. The hat hummed, curious. There is something broken in you. Something foreign. Harry's stomach clenched. And you have caged it, the hat said, sounding impressed. How very unchildlike. Harry's fingers tightened on the stool edge. Where do I put a boy raised under stone? The hat wondered. A mind that counts fear instead of feeling it. A heart that negotiates instead of hopes. The hat's voice sharpened. You will not enjoy Gryffindor. Too much noise. A flicker of image. Red, shouting, glory. Harry rejected it instantly. Ravenclaw would admire your patterns. The hat continued, thoughtful. But you would become a hoard of secrets with no spine to use them. Then, a pause, longer. The hat's tone shifted. Ah. Harry felt it like the hat had found a chamber in him and stepped inside. Ambition, it said softly. Not for power, but for control. For safety. For leverage. Harry's scar pulsed faintly, pleased. Harry counted. And you understand the oldest truth in this castle, the hat whispered. That rules are just wards, and wards can be rewritten. A whisper of amusement. That is very Slytherin. Harry's jaw clenched. Slytherin meant snakes. Dark wizards. Voldemort. But the hat wasn't sorting him by reputation. It was sorting him by function. And function didn't care about stories. The hat's voice turned sharp, decisive, almost pleased. Slytherin. The hall erupted, cheers from the green and silver table, murmurs everywhere else. McGonagall lifted the hat quickly, like she wanted the moment done. Harry stood, and for a heartbeat, he felt hundreds of eyes on him. Suspicion, fascination, fear, curiosity. Dumbledore's gaze met his. Soft, sad, strategic. Harry turned away. He walked to the Slytherin table and sat among strangers who watched him like he was a rare weapon left unattended. Some smiled too brightly. Some stared too long. And at the far end, Draco Malfoy's eyes gleamed with fresh calculation, like he'd just realized the pet goblin wasn't a joke. He was competition. Harry placed his hands on the table. Under his sleeve, the silver wedge pressed against his wrist. On his palm, the rune mark warmed faintly. Keth, wedge, breaker. And all around him, Hogwarts' ancient wards hummed like a sleeping dragon, beautiful, dangerous, full of cracks that only someone raised under stone would ever think to look for. Harry learned two things in Slytherin. First, the common room was not a home. It was a market. Second, Hogwarts lied, not with words, with architecture. On the surface, the castle pretended to be whimsical, moving staircases, singing ceilings, portraits that gossiped like they were alive. But Harry's eyes kept catching the seams beneath the charm. Repairs layered over older repairs. Wards patched in a hurry. Ancient enchantments carrying newer spells like bandages on bone. Hogwarts wasn't a school. It was a monument made of traps. And Slytherin, cold green light and underwater silence, understood that better than the other houses did. The older students spoke in half-offers and polite threats. The younger ones copied them because copying was survival. Draco Malfoy tried again after sorting. Not in the corridor this time. At dinner, where the teachers could see and the crowd could be impressed. Draco leaned in with a smile too clean to be real. "My father says we should be friends," he said loudly enough for people nearby to hear. "It's only right, after everything. You shouldn't have to associate with the wrong sort." It was an invitation wrapped around a hook wrapped around a leash. Harry looked at him the way he looked at a ward junction, not as a person but as a structure. "You're offering protection," Harry said flatly. Draco blinked. "Well, yes, obviously." Quote. Harry's scar pulsed faintly, amused by the social performance. Harry counted silently. "You don't own protection," Harry said. "You rent it." Draco's smile faltered. "Excuse me." Harry didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You want my name in your pocket," Harry continued. "So your family can spend it when convenient." Draco's cheeks pinked. "That's not." Harry's gaze slid past Draco to the older students watching. The ones with last names that tasted like old money and older grudges. "I'm already in someone's pocket," Harry said calmly. "And their contracts are older than yours." A hush, small, sharp, moved down the Slytherin table. Draco's expression stiffened. Then he forced a laugh. "Fine. Enjoy being their pet." Harry's reply as quiet enough to feel like a knife slid into a seam. "Pets get fed," he said. Draco's face went red. He stormed off. And just like that, Slytherin stopped trying to decide if Harry was weak. EY started trying to decide if he was dangerous. The first attack happened in October. Harry heard the scream before he saw the body, echoing through stone corridors like a warning bell. Students ran. Professors shouted. The air thickened with panic. Harry didn't run toward the crowd. He ran toward the silence behind it. Because if something attacked in a castle full of wards, the real story was always in the place the wards had failed. He arrived at the corridor just as the teachers pushed students back. A cat hung stiff as carved wood on a torch bracket, eyes wide and glassy. Petrified. The word passed through the hallway like a cold draft. McGonagall's face was tight with fury and fear. Filch looked like the world had finally found a way to kill him without blood. Dumbledore stood at the edge of the scene. Serene in the way people became serene when they were forcing the world to behave. His eyes found Harry instantly. Harry didn't look away. He looked at the wall. He looked at the stones. And his vision caught the hidden lattice like a flash of lightning under skin. There were traces. Not of footsteps. Of pressure. Something enormous had moved here and the castle had remembered it in vibrations. The ward lines were subtly warped, as if something had slid along them and left residue. Harry's teeth ached. A serpent path. Not a literal one, Harry didn't know that yet, but a resonance pattern that made the stone feel hushed, like prey holding its breath. Hermione Granger appeared beside him, breathless, eyes bright with terror and fascination. She didn't stand close like a friend. She stood close like someone who had noticed he always arrived at the right places. "Harry," she whispered. They're saying it's the Chamber of Secrets." Harry didn't ask how she knew. Hermione collected information like goblins collected gold. He kept his gaze on the wall. "Chamber," he repeated, tasting the word. Hermione shivered. "Legend says Slytherin built a hidden chamber under the school and left a monster inside to purge Muggle-borns." Harry's scar pulsed faintly at the word monster. Harry counted. "Legends are traps," Harry said. Hermione swallowed. "Then, you think it's real?" Harry didn't answer with yes or no. He answered with math. "The wards in this corridor weren't broken," he murmured. "They were bypassed." Hermione stared at him. "Bypassed how?" Harry's eyes narrowed. "By something the castle recognizes as internal. Something ancient. Something written into Hogwarts foundations." Hermione's voice dropped. "So it could be Slytherins." Harry's fingers tightened inside his sleeve where the silver wedge rested. He didn't like being right. That night, an owl arrived at the Gringotts liaison niche, an ugly little office carved behind a tapestry, claimed by treaty and sealed with runic plates. It smelled faintly of iron and ink, and it made Harry's shoulders loosen for the first time all day. The OWL carried a single sheet of stiff parchment. No flowery handwriting, no affection, just directives. Observe. Do not intervene without cause. Map anomaly. Record ward signatures. If anchor structure detected, do not destroy. Isolate. Harry stared at the last line longer than the rest. Anchor structure. He thought of the knot in his scar. He thought of the vault that fed on fear. Systems. Loops. Fuel. Hogwarts wasn't just having an accident. Something was feeding. Harry pocketed the directive and went to the library. Not because he enjoyed books. Because books were dead things. T held information without trying to hug you. Hermione was already there, surrounded by stacks like she'd built herself a fortress. She looked up sharply. "You came." Harry sat across from her without asking. "You're hunting the chamber." Quote. Hermione's eyes flashed. "Of course I am." Harry slid his stylus out and tapped it lightly on the table. The dragon bone core steadied the air around it. "Nay." RB students glanced nervously and then looked away. "What do you know about Hogwarts foundations?" Harry asked. Hermione blinked. "Foundations. Older wards," Harry corrected. "The ones that recognize what belongs here." Hermione's gaze sharpened with understanding. She leaned in, flipping a book around. "Hogwarts has enchantments layered from the Founders' era," she whispered. "But most of it is undocumented. The Ministry didn't exist then. Records are scattered." Harry's eyes traced a diagram in the book. Plumbing added centuries later, pipes threaded through older stonework like veins forced into bone. His teeth ached. Pipes. He remembered the corridor's resonance signature, sliding, smooth, cold. Where would a chamber hide, Harry murmured, if it needed to move a creature unseen? Hermione's eyes widened slowly. "In the walls," she whispered. "In the pipes," Harry corrected. Hermione swallowed. "But Hogwarts plumbing wasn't around in Slytherin's time." Harry's mouth tightened. "Then someone adapted it. Or the chamber isn't exactly where the legend says it is." Hermione's voice went smaller. "Or, it's deeper." Harry's scar pulsed faintly again, as if pleased by the thought of depth. Harry counted. The second attack hit harder. A student, petrified near the courtyard, eyes wide with frozen horror. A trail of water on the floor. Whispers became screams. Parents threatened to pull children out. Teachers doubled patrols. Slytherin students started smiling again. Not all of them, not openly. But Harry heard it in the way they spoke, the satisfactio. End of a rumor that made other people afraid. Draco cornered Harry near the common room entrance that week, voice low and eager. "My father says the chamber is opening," Draco whispered, eyes shining. He says it's our heritage." Harry looked at him. "Heritage. Another hook. If it's your heritage," Harry asked calmly, "why are you afraid?" Draco's face flickered. He didn't answer. Harry leaned in slightly. Voice softer. "What did your father give you this summer?" Draco's eyes widened. "Nothing." Harry didn't blink. "Lying is expensive." Draco's mouth opened, and then he did something that surprised Harry. He whispered, furious and terrified, "He gave my mother a diary. Old. She said it was special. And then it disappeared. Harry went very still. A diary. An object. A potential anchor. Gringotts had told him, do not destroy, isolate. Harry's pulse stayed steady. He counted anyway. Where did it disappear? Harry asked. Draco swallowed. I don't know. But, my father's been in a mood. He keeps asking if anyone's been acting strange. Harry stared at Draco for a long moment. Then he did something else Slytherin didn't expect. He offered Draco a deal. If you hear anything, Harry said quietly, you tell me first. Draco's eyes narrowed. Why would I help you? Harry's voice stayed flat. Because if it's your heritage, it's your mess. And I don't like cleaning up human messes without payment. Draco blinked, thrown off by the language. Harry turned away before Draco could find a reply. He wasn't recruiting Draco. He was using him as a pressure sensor. A surface indicator. The breakthrough came by accident. Or what humans called accident. Harry called it pattern recognition. He was walking back from the library late when he heard it, soft, almost nothing. Like stone whispering in its sleep. Not English. Not gobbledygook. Something older. A hiss of intent sliding through the pipes. Students didn't react. They couldn't hear it. Harry could. His scar burned faintly, like the knot inside him wanted to answer. Harry clenched his jaw and counted under his breath. The hiss continued. Come, come. Not words. Direction. The pipes were carrying a call. Harry followed it. He moved through corridors that grew emptier, colder. The castle's hum shifted. The hidden ward lattice thickened as he descended, as if Arts itself tried to discourage intrusion. He stopped outside a girl's bathroom. A place no one patrolled. A place neglected. Neglected places always hid cracks. The bathroom was damp and empty, sinks lined up like tired mouths. Water dripped somewhere, steady and patient. And the hiss was loud here. Not loud like sound. Loud like pressure. Harry stepped toward the sinks. He saw it NTLY, an engraved serpent on the tap of the farthest sink, worn with age. The carving didn't match the rest, older, sharper. A founder's era seam. Harry's teeth ached. He leaned down, eyes narrowing. The serpent engraving wasn't just a picture. It was a keyhole, a contract mark. Harry's scar pulsed. The knot inside him stirred, eager. Harry's fingers tightened on his stylus. He didn't want to use Parseltongue like a gift. He wanted to use it like a function. He leaned close to the serpent engraving and let his breath out slow, controlled, like speaking to a ward. Then he hissed. Not a sentence. Not a spell. A frequency. A resonance shaped by the deep earth way he'd learned to listen, like tapping a vault door at the precise point where the lock responded. The serpent engraving warmed. The sink shuddered. Stone groaned. And the drain opened. The sink slid aside, revealing a black shaft that dropped into darkness like a throat. Harry stared down. Cold air rose from it, smelling like wet stone and old venom. His ward band warmed. His scar burned. And for the first time, Harry felt Hogwarts' foundations shift, like the castle had just admitted it kept secrets. Harry didn't climb in immediately. He backed up and drew his stylus out. He carved 2 small runes into the tile near the shaft, stabilizers, dampeners, so the air wouldn't spike fear into him the way the vault had. Then he took a small pouch from his pocket, something Gringotts had issued him without ceremony. Basalt dust. Powdered black stone. Dampener. He sprinkled it lightly along his robe. Cuffs and over the silver wedge inside his sleeve. If there was a serpent, there were eyes. Eyes could be fooled. Basalt dust dulled reflections and softened magical glare. He inhaled once, counted, then climbed into the dark. The shaft dropped him into a tunnel lined with pipes as thick as tree trunks. He landed on damp stone, knees bending instinctively, and the sound echoed like the chamber laughed at him. The hiss was everywhere down here. Not one voice. Many. Stone memory. Serpent path. He moved forward slowly, stylus in one hand, wedge in the other. The air grew colder. The walls grew older. Then the tunnel opened into a cavern so vast Harry couldn't see the ceiling. A statue the size of a building loomed ahead, Salazar Slytherin's face carved into stone, mouth open like a command. Harry's vision flashed with ward lattice so dense it made his skull ache. This place wasn't protected like a classroom. It was protected like a vault. And the protections weren't designed to stop intruders. They were designed to select intruders. Harry's scar pulsed again. The knot inside him leaned forward like it wanted to drink this place. Harry counted hard, forcing the pulse back into its corner. Then he saw her. A girl lay on the stone near the statue, limp and pale, red hair spread like spilled copper. Ginny Weasley. Harry recognized her from the surface, Ron's little sister. Always hovering at the edges, eyes wide, too shy to breathe too loud. Her chest rose faintly. Alive. Barely. And beside her, a book. A diary, open on the floor, pages fluttering in a wind that didn't exist. Harry's stomach went cold. Anchor structure. He could feel it, like a knot in the air, like the scar in his skull had found a sibling. The diary's ink crawled slightly, as if alive. And then, without warning, the diary wrote by itself. Hello, Harry. Harry went very still. The scar burned. The knot inside him pulsed, delighted. The cavern air shifted. And from the darkness behind the statue, something massive moved, smooth and silent, like a train made of muscle. Harry didn't look away from the diary. Because he understood mechanisms. The diary wasn't just a book. It was a lockpick inside a child's mind. And whatever was coming out of the shadows wasn't the real enemy. It was the weapon. The diary was the hand holding the leash. Harry tightened his grip on the silver wedge. Basalt dust clung to his fingers. He breathed in once, counted, and lifted his stylus, ready to carve the world into a shape that could keep him alive. Because if the chamber was a trap, then Harry Potter had been raised to do one thing better than anyone in the castle. Find the seam. The diary wrote again. Hello, Harry. Ink crawled across the page like a living thing, black and wet and smug. The letters looked too neat, like someone had practiced being charming for a long time. Harry didn't answer. He did what the deep had trained into him the way Breed Hing had been trained into other children. He measured. He listened. He looked without looking. From the darkness behind Slytherin's stone face, something huge shifted, silent muscle on wet stone. A scrape like a railcar sliding without wheels. The air tasted faintly of metal and old venom. Harry kept his eyes down. He did not give the chamber the gift of panic. He counted once, under his breath. 1. And in that single number, he made a decision. The basilisk was a weapon. The diary was the hand holding the leash. So he would cut the leash. Not the fangs. Ginny's chest rose shallowly. Too shallow. Her skin had a gray cast, like someone was slowly draining the color out of her. Harry's rune sight caught it instantly. A thin thread, black ink dark, ran from Ginny's sternum to the open diary. Pulsing in time with her weakening heartbeat. A siphon. An anchor feed. Harry's scar burned, recognition, like the knot inside him had smelled a relative. The diary's page rippled. I've been waiting for you. The ink wrote. It's funny. I always wondered what you'd look like up close. Harry didn't let himself react. He pulled his stylus out, dragon bone humming faintly, and crouched beside Ginny. His ward band warmed automatically, like it knew he was near a life at risk. He reached into his pocket and took out a pinch of basalt dust. He sprinkled it in a thin line around Ginny's shoulders and neck, an ugly little ring of black powder. Not a barrier. A dampener. It would flatten the emotional spike the chamber kept trying to squeeze out of him, and it would keep Ginny's fading magic from leaking into the diary like an open vein. Harry's hands were steady, not because he felt steady, because counting made his fingers obey. He turned the silver wedge over in his palm. Its edge caught rune light for a heartbeat, clean, reflective. Silver conducted intent cleanly. Silver cut contracts. Harry angled the wedge toward the ink thread and didn't touch the thread with skin. He touched it with metal. The moment the wedge's edge met the ink thread, the air snapped like a wire breaking. Ginny's body jerked once, sharp and hale, like someone yanking her back from underwater. The diary's page spasmed. Ink splattered. Rude, it wrote. Then the cavern air tightened. Something enormous slid forward. Harry didn't look up. He listened. He felt it through his feet, a vibration in the stone. A thick, smooth glide that didn't belong to any normal creature. The pressure of its presence pressed against his ribs like the Fear Feeder vault had tried to do. His scar pulsed. Delighted, Harry clenched his jaw. 2. The ward band warmed, runes shifting in sequence, stabilize, contain, override. Harry moved faster. He pressed 2 fingers lightly to Ginny's throat. Pulse. Weak, but there. Good. He reached for the diary. The instant his hand neared it, the air around the book twitched, a ward lattice so fine it was almost invisible. Not Hogwarts magic. Not Gringotts. Something old and human and arrogant, pretending to be harmless. Harry didn't grab it. He didn't flip it shut. He did what Ragnald would have done to any suspicious mechanism. He clamped it. Harry carved a single rune into the stone beside the diary, fast, clean, an operator that meant hold. Then he drew a second rune, deny flow. He linked them with a short line, if then. It wasn't pretty. It didn't need to be. The stone answered. A faint, cold pressure wrapped around the diary like an invisible hand. The ink froze mid-writhe. The diary's page went still. For a half-second, the cavern felt offended. Then the diary wrote again, slower now, as if pushing through resistance. Clever. Goblin training. Harry's scar burned hotter. The knot inside him stirred like it wanted to talk back. Harry counted. 3. He kept his eyes on the diary, not because he trusted it, but because it was safer than the dark behind the statue. You're an anchor, Harry said aloud, voice flat. Not a question, a classification. The diary paused. Then the ink shaped itself into a smooth, amused curve of handwriting. Anchor. What a dry word for something so personal. A flicker of memory pressed against Harry's skull, someone else's memory. A boy's laughter. A prefect badge. A green and silver tie. A charm that looked like kindness. The diary wasn't just writing. It was reaching. Harry's fingers tightened around his stylus until the dragon bone bit his skin. You feed, Harry said, voice tight now. You drain life to grow. The diary's ink curled into something that looked like a smile. We all feed. You're fed by gold. I'm fed by fear and blood. The basilisk slid closer. Harry could feel it now, air moving wrong, the dampness of its breath, the immense weight of it. He did not look up. He reached into his pocket again, found a small folded strip of rune wire, goblin silver filament, thin as a hair but hard as a promise. He began wrapping it around the diary, once, twice, 3 times, binding the cover and pages shut without touching the leather. The diary's ink flared angry. Stop. You don't understand what you're holding. Harry's mouth was dry. I understand security. The diary went still. Then, slowly, a new line formed. Tom Marvolo Riddle. The name landed in Harry's mind like a coin dropped into deep water. Not because he recognized it. Because the castle did. For a heartbeat, Hogwarts' ancient enchantments hummed, distant, layered, old. Harry's scar burned. The knot inside him pulsed hard, as if it recognized that name in a way Harry didn't. Harry didn't let it steer him. He tightened the rune wire. The diary's cover creaked like it resisted being treated like cargo. I can give you everything, the ink wrote, frantic now. You're so alone. They've made you a tool. Let me make you a king. Harry's hands didn't stop. He didn't want a crown. Crowns were just collars people pretended were pretty. He finished the binding, then snapped the rune wire shut with a tiny silver clasp. The diary shuddered. Its ink bled into the page margins like bruising. Harry slid the bound diary into his basalt-lined pouch and cinched it tight. The pouch went cold instantly, like the basalt swallowed the book's heat. The diary's voice, its presence, didn't vanish. But it muffled. Caged. Harry exhaled once. And that's when the basilisk struck. Stone exploded somewhere above him, chips of rock raining down. The air whooshed as something massive snapped forward. Harry heard it first, the wet, violent rush of breath, the scrape of scales. The whip crack of a tail hitting stone hard enough to leave cracks. Ginny made a soft sound, half cough, half whimper. Harry scooped her under the arms and dragged her backward, keeping his eyes on the floor. A shadow slid across the stone in front of him, long, impossibly long. He did not look at its head. He didn't need to. He could hear it. It moved like a river forced into a tunnel. The chamber's air thickened with the taste of venom. Harry's scar pulsed, delighted again, and this time it tried to push an idea into him, an urge to look, to meet the monster with violence, to let the chaos bloom. Harry counted hard. 4, 5, 6. The ward band warmed like a clamp around his wrist. The urge dulled. Harry's mind snapped back into structure. He needed one thing, a way to make the basilisk's eyes irrelevant. He couldn't conjure mirrors. He couldn't blind it with spells he didn't know. So he did it the goblin way. He broke the environment into a weapon. Harry shoved Ginny behind a stone outcropping and slammed his silver wedge into a pipe seam. The pipe burst with a scream of metal. Steam blasted out in a thick white cloud, swallowing the cavern's center. Fog. A line of sight breaker. The basilisk hissed, angry, confused, its body shifting, crushing stone as it searched. Harry stayed low. He moved by sound. He moved by vibration. He felt the basilisk's head sweep through the steam, felt the air change when it passed, felt the faint suction of its gaze like the pressure of a ward searching for a trigger. He did not give it eyes. He gave it math. He carved 3 quick runes into the stone at his feet. Distort. Refract. Return. A crude gaze shatter lattice, nothing like a full vault ward, but enough to bend intent and scatter focus through steam. The air around him shimmered slightly. If the basilisk looked through the fog toward him, its killing gaze would fracture, reduced, redirected, blunted. Maybe petrification. Maybe less. Better than death. The basilisk lunged again, steam ripping apart as its head snapped forward, jaws wide. Harry heard the teeth slice air. He rolled sideways, not away. Under. He head slammed into stone and shook the cavern. Harry sprang up and hissed, Parseltongue, sharp and commanding. Stop. Coil. For half a heartbeat, the basilisk hesitated. It heard the frequency. It recognized the authority. Its body tightened, confused, caught between 2 masters. Then, from the muffled basalt pouch at Harry's hip, the diary pulsed. Not words. Control. The basilisk's hesitation snapped. It roared, hiss and pressure, and surged again. Harry's pulse didn't spike. It flattened. Because now he understood the system. The diary was the leash. The basilisk was the muscle. If he couldn't stop the leash from tugging, he would break the muscle's ability to move. Harry sprinted, not toward the exit shaft, not yet. Toward the statue. Salazar Slytherin's face loomed, mouth open like a tunnel into darkness. Harry's rune sight caught it instantly. The statue wasn't just stone. It was loaded, ward channels carved into its base, old and heavy, like Hogwarts. Founders had built a conduit here for power. A support, a brace, a structural node. Harry slammed his wedge into a seam at the statue's base, the same kind of seam you'd cut to collapse a support column in a trapped corridor. He didn't hack, he cut. One precise strike. The seam flashed faintly. A deep groan rolled through the cavern. The basilisk lunged straight at him, steam swirling around its head. Harry dove aside at the last possible moment. The basilisk's skull, massive, heavy, smashed into the statue's lower jaw. Harry drove his wedge deeper into the seam. And the support finally gave. Stone shifted. The statue's lower jaw cracked and dropped with the sound of a mountain swallowing. It slammed down across the basilisk's neck. Not cleanly. Not enough to kill. Enough to pin. The basilisk thrashed. Tail smashing pipes, steam roaring thicker, its body whipping like a hurricane trapped in a tunnel. But its head, its eyes, were forced down. Its killing gaze pointed at stone. Harry stayed on the floor. Chest heaving. He didn't celebrate. He crawled to Ginny. Her eyes fluttered. She made a weak sound. Harry pressed his ward band against her wrist, just for a second. And the band's heat surged into her skin like it recognized asset integrity in any form it could obey. Ginny's breathing steadied slightly. Harry exhaled. Then he stood. He couldn't carry her and fight a pinned basilisk forever. So he did the one thing Gringotts had taught him that Hogwarts hadn't. He signaled. Harry slapped his ward band twice in a sharp rhythm, protocol emergency, then P. Rest his marked palm flat to the stone floor. The rune on his palm warmed. The floor answered with a faint pulse. Not Hogwarts magic. Treaty magic. A line back to Gringotts, claimed niche in the castle. A flare down a private tunnel. Harry didn't know who would come. He just knew the Deep didn't ignore alarms attached to assets. Getting out took everything he had. He dragged Ginny toward the shaft in short, brutal pulls. Stopping every few steps to listen for the basilisk's thrashing and the statue's groaning. Steam filled his lungs, hot and metallic, but it kept the chamber blind. At the base of the shaft, he hissed again, Parseltongue, controlled. The stone shifted. The passage opened. Harry hauled Ginny into the tunnel and began the climb, fingers slipping on wet pipe metal, knees bruising on stone. Behind them, the basilisk screamed again, pressure, rage, and the statue groaned like it might not hold. Harry did not look back. He climbed. He counted. He climbed. Light, bathroom light, finally appeared above, dim and ugly and perfect. Harry shoved Ginny out onto the tiles first, then pulled himself up and collapsed, breathing like he'd been running for years. Ginny lay on her side, pale but alive. Harry's hands shook. He reached into the basalt pouch at his hip. The diary pulsed faintly, angry, muffled, present. Harry stared at it and felt the scar in his skull ache in response. 2 anchors, 2 knots, 2 hungry mechanisms. He didn't have the words yet. But he had the instinct. Mechanisms repeated, which meant this wasn't unique. It was a pattern. Footsteps thundered in the corridor outside the bathroom, voices shouting, a teacher's sharp command, panic colliding with authority. McGonagall burst in first, wand raised. Her eyes locked on Ginny. Then on Harry. Then on the black basalt dust on the tiles and the steam still seeping from the broken sink like the castle itself was trying to breathe out. "Mr. Potter," she said, voice tight enough to cut glass. "What have you done?" Harry didn't answer her question. He answered the real one. He lifted the basalt pouch slightly, careful, like displaying evidence in a court where the judge was stone. "A dark anchor," Harry said. It was feeding on her. McGonagall froze. For the first time, her eyes looked past the scar and saw the method. "Where did you get that term?" she whispered. Harry's mouth was dry. The deep has better words for things that want to live forever. McGonagall's gaze snapped toward the doorway. More teachers arrived, Flitwick, Snape like a shadow, and finally, Dumbledore. He stepped in, calm as ever, but the moment his eyes landed on Ginny's face and Harry's basalt pouch, something in his serenity cracked. He moved faster than Harry had ever seen him move. "Ginny." Dumbledore breathed, and his wand was already out, casting diagnostic charms like he was trying to rewind time. McGonagall's voice was sharp. "He says a dark artifact." Dumbledore's gaze lifted to Harry. "Not soft now. Not sorrowful. Alert." "Harry," Dumbledore said quietly. "What is in that pouch?" Harry held his gaze. He did not offer it. He stated terms. "It's evidence," Harry said. "And it's not yours." The bathroom went very, very still. Snape's eyes narrowed like blades. McGonagall's lips parted in shock. Dumbledore's gaze flicked briefly, just on. "CE," to the goblin ward band on Harry's wrist. "Understanding." Then a new sound cut through the castle's tension, measured footsteps, not human, coming down the corridor like a contract walking. Gripu. Kay appeared in the doorway with Envoy Karst behind him, both of them utterly calm in a room full of wands. Karst's eyes went to the pouch immediately. Then to Harry. Then to Dumbledore. "Headmaster," Karst said smoothly. "Treaty notification. Gringotts Acid issued an emergency flare. We respond." Dumbledore's voice was controlled. "This is Hogwarts business." Karst's smile was thin. "T.S. is Gringotts business the moment an anchor structure is involved." Harry's scar pulsed faintly, excited by conflict. Harry counted. Dumbledore's gaze didn't leave Harry. "Harry, this artifact is dangerous." Harry nodded once. "That's why it's caged." Griphook stepped closer, eyes gleaming. "Show." Harry drew the basalt pouch open just enough to reveal the diary's bound edge, silver wire tight, runes dull and stubborn. Ink bruising at the seams like something alive pressing against a coffin. Karst exhaled softly, impressed despite himself. "Containment is competent." Dumbledore's eyes hardened. "It must be destroyed." Karst's voice was calm as stone. "It must be audited." Harry looked between them, wand and treaty, prophecy and ledger, and felt the shape of his life click into place. Above ground, they called it destiny. In the deep, it was simpler. It was a system, and systems could be mapped. That night, back in his treaty-sealed niche, Harry opened a fresh sheet of park. H meant and drew a line down the center like a ledger. On the left, he wrote, "Anchor 00, Scar Knot, Foreign Presence, Reactive to Fear Chaos." On the right, he wrote, "Anchor 01, Diary, Tom Riddle. Feeds on life, fear, controls deep earth beast." He stared at the 2 entries until his eyes hurt. Then he added a third line beneath them. Hypothesis. If one anchor exists, more exist. Pattern implies network. His stylus hovered. His hand steadied. And in the quiet, with the diary muffled but still pulsing like a trapped heart, Harry wrote the first words of the thing that would eventually end a war long before it began. Ledger of Immortality, audit required. The diary did not like silence. Even inside basalt, even wrapped in goblin silver wire, even clamped by runes carved into stone. It pulsed like a trapped heart, angry, patient, certain it would be opened again. Harry sat in his treaty niche with the pouch on the desk in front of him and forced himself to breathe normally. Not because he was calm. Because calm was a tool. Across from him, Envoy Karst stood with his hands folded behind his back, posture perfect. Griphook leaned against the doorframe like he'd been carved there. Outside the niche, Hogwarts, night hummed with distant footsteps and whispers. Inside, the air felt like a vault. Report, Karst said. Harry slid his parchment forward, his ledger sheet, now smudged with basalt dust and written in neat, brutal lines. Karst read without expression. Griphook read over his shoulder, eyes gleaming faintly at the words ANCHOR01 and Ledger of Immortality. When Karst finished, he set the paper down with care, like it might bite. You used a siphon cut, he said. Harry nodded. Silver wedge, not skin contact. You dampened the environment, Karst continued. Basalt dust, steam break, line of sight interference. Harry nodded again. Karst's gaze sharpened. And you did not destroy the artifact. Harry's jaw tightened. Gringotts directive, isolate. Griphook's mouth twitched. Good asset. Harry hated that it sounded like praise. Karst extended his hand. Transfer. Harry didn't move for a heartbeat. Not because he wanted the diary. Because handing it over meant the next choices wouldn't be his. The ward band warmed slightly, like a reminder, wardship. Harry placed the basalt pouch into Karst's palm. The instant it left him, the diary pulsed harder, as if it recognized authority changing hands and resented losing leverage. Karst didn't flinch. He simply snapped a second clasp on the pouch and traced a sealing rune in the air. The pouch went colder, quieter. Now, Karst said, looking at Harry, the surface will argue. As if summoned by the word, the niche door opened. Not by Hogwarts, by force of presence. Albus Dumbledore stepped inside, and the room's temperature seemed to shift around him, warmer, softer, human. He looked older than the last time Harry had seen him, and Harry realized with a cold, unpleasant clarity that kindness could be armor too. Dumbledore's eyes went straight to the basalt pouch in Karst's hand. Then to Harry. Then to the ward band. Good evening, Dumbledore said gently. I hope I am not intruding. Karst's smile was thin. This is Gringotts treaty space. Intrusion is a category humans struggle with. Dumbledore's eyes flickered, annoyance, quickly smoothed away. Quite. He stepped closer. Careful, Harry. Ginny Weasley is stable. Madame Pomfrey believes she will recover fully. Harry's shoulders loosened a fraction. Good. Dumbledore's gaze softened. You saved her life. Harry didn't answer that. Saving someone's life felt messy. Too emotional. Too close to stories. So he said the truer thing. I interrupted a siphon. Dumbledore's expression tightened at the phrasing. Then his eyes returned to the pouch. That diary must be destroyed. Karst didn't move. It must be audited. Dumbledore's voice stayed calm, but steel lived under it now. Every moment it exists is a risk. Griphook's voice was dry. Every moment a vault exists as a risk. Yet you keep money. Dumbledore's gaze sharpened. This is not money. This is a mechanism, Harry said quietly. The three of them looked at him. Harry forced his breath steady. It fed on a child. It controlled a basilisk. It carries a name. That's structure. Dumbledore's eyes held his. And some structures must be burned, Harry. Harry's scar pulsed faintly at the word burned, like the knot enjoyed the idea of fire. Harry counted silently. Karst spoke first. Headmaster, your school permitted this artifact to operate under your wards. Dumbledore's jaw clenched. Hogwarts did not permit. It did, Karst interrupted smoothly. By failing to detect. Failure is permission in the deep. Dumbledore's eyes flashed. Brief, dangerous. You are not wrong. But you are not entitled to take control of this. Karst's smile sharpened. We already have treaty provision. The ward is ours. The artifact targeted the ward's operational environment. This is now Gringotts' business. Dumbledore's gaze slid to Harry again, as if trying to reach him through the language of contracts. Harry, do you understand what you are carrying? Harry didn't look away. A keyhole into someone's mind. Dumbledore's eyes widened slightly. Harry continued, voice flat, because flat was safe. It introduced memories. It provoked fear. It drained life. It wrote. It negotiated. Dumbledore's voice went softer. It is a piece of a soul. Silence. Not dramatic silence. Ledger silence. Harry's stomach went cold anyway. 8. Soul, Harry repeated carefully. Dumbledore nodded once. Yes. Griphook's eyes narrowed. Define. Dumbledore's gaze didn't leave Harry. Dark magic exists that can split the soul. That can anchor a fragment to an object. It is rare, evil, and extremely difficult to undo. Harry's scar burned. The knot inside him pulsed, recognition, like an animal lifting its head at a familiar scent. Harry's throat tightened. Then the scar. Dumbledore's mouth thinned. Yes. Karst's expression didn't change, but the air shifted. Griphook's posture tightened like a blade being drawn. Harry's voice came out too steady. So I am also an anchor. Dumbledore didn't deny it. For the first time since Harry had met him, Dumbledore looked like a man who hated being honest. You carry a fragment, Dumbledore said quietly. Unintended. A consequence of the curse that marked you. Harry swallowed. The Deep had always called it a foreign knot. Now it had a name. Soul fragment. Anchor. Mechanism made of human. Griphook spoke softly, almost amused. Humans are always hiding pieces of themselves in objects. It is why your inheritance disputes last generations. Dumbledore didn't react to the jab. His eyes stayed on Harry. Harry, this is why I wanted you protected. This is why. This is why you left me in a cupboard. Harry asked, and his eyes stayed flat but something sharp edged it. Dumbledore flinched, just slightly. No, he said quietly. It is not. Harry didn't push further. Not because he forgave. Because he had learned something more useful than blame. He had learned pattern. Dumbledore feared the diary because he understood it. Gringotts wanted the diary because they could monetize and neutralize it. And Harry. RRY wanted to map the entire network before someone else used it to control him again. Karst turned slightly. Headmaster. We will audit it. Dumbledore's tone hardened. And if your audit fails. Karst's smile was thin. Then we will destroy it. But we will destroy it properly. Dumbledore's eyes narrowed. Properly. Griphook answered, voice cold. Not by smashing a mechanism and hoping it dies quietly. Dumbledore's jaw clenched. You think I would be careless? Griphook's eyes gleamed. We think humans are always careless when emotion is involved. Harry watched Dumbledore's face tighten. And for a heartbeat he saw it. The rage under the kindness, the grief under the calm, the burden of knowing too much. Dumbledore spoke like a man choosing a lesser evil. Then allow me to be present during the audit. Karst paused, calculating. Griphook looked at Harry. It wasn't permission. It was a question framed as observation. Harry inhaled once. Counted. Then said, witnesses reduce theft. Karst's smile sharpened. Agreed. Dumbledore's eyes flickered, something like relief. Harry didn't trust it, but he accepted it. Because witnesses were leverage. They didn't audit the diary in Hogwarts. They audited it in the Deep, where walls listened and law had weight. A sealed annex existed under the castle, treaty-bound stone carved into a pocket between Hogwarts foundations and the lake bedrock. Not quite Gringotts, not quite Hogwarts. A sovereign blister of space that smelled like metal and ink. Harry had never been allowed there before. Now, he walked into IT with Dumbledore at his left and Griphook and Karst at his right. And he felt something in Hogwarts wards bristle as if the castle resented not owning what lay beneath it. The annex chamber was circular. Basalt-lined. Rune-lit. At the center sat a stone plinth with a shallow groove, a containment cradle designed for objects that wanted to be immortal. Karst placed the basalt pouch on the plinth and stepped back. Griphook drew out 3 tools. A goblin silver needle as fine as a hair. A black basalt ring etched with dampening runes. And a small crystal disc that hummed faintly, an instrument that measured resonance like a stethoscope measured heartbeats. Dumbledore watched with tense fascination. RRY watched with hunger for understanding. Karst spoke like reading a clause. Audit procedure, resonance assay. Identity verification, anchor mapping, severance risk assessment. Dumbledore's voice was quiet. You have done this before. Quote. Griphook didn't look at him. Humans have been trying to cheat death since the first coin was minted. Karst gestured to Harry. Keth will observe, not touch. Harry's jaw tightened but he nodded. Griphook unlatched the pouch. The bound diary slid out onto the plinth. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the diary's cover shivered. Ink seeped from the seam like sweat. You can't keep me locked forever, it wrote, except it didn't write on its own pages. It wrote on the air. A thin black script hovered above the plinth like a threat. Dumbledore's wand snapped up instantly. Karst didn't move. Griphook simply placed the basalt ring around the diary. The black script froze, then shattered like ash. The diary pulsed, furious. Harry's scar burned in response. Two anchors recognizing each other. Harry clenched his jaw and counted until the burn dulled. Griphook pressed the silver needle to the diary's spine. The needle didn't pierce leather. It pierced concept. Harry saw it in his rune sight, a thin line of cold light threading from the needle into the diary, searching for the knot that made the object more than an object. The crystal disc hummed. Karst watched the vibration pattern like reading a ledger. Then he said, quietly, confirmed. Dumbledore's voice went tight. Horcrux. The word landed in the room like a curse. Harry stared. Horcrux. Griphook's eyes narrowed. A human word. Dumbledore nodded once. A fragment of soul anchored to an object. It tethers the creator to life. Karst's expression didn't change. Immortality scheme. Inelegant. Dumbledore's gaze sharpened. It is beyond inelegant. It is monstrous. Griphook's tone was dry. Monstrous is a moral category. We are auditing a mechanism. Harry's throat tightened. Whose mechanism? The diary pulsed. Ink crawled toward the plinth edge like it wanted to escape. Dumbledore's voice became very careful. Tom Marvolo Riddle. Harry felt the scar knot pulse again, hard. As if the name turned a key inside him. Harry counted until his teeth stopped aching. Dumbledore continued. He later called himself Lord Voldemort. The room seemed to tighten around the name. Harry did not flinch. He'd flinched enough in cupboards. He stared at the diary like it was a faulty vault ward. Then he made more, Harry said. Dumbledore's eyes narrowed. Karst's gaze sharpened. Griphook's mouth twitched, pleased. Harry's voice stayed flat. Mechanisms like this don't exist as single points. If you build one anchor, you build redundancies. You build a network. Dumbledore's silence was answer enough. Karst spoke like a man admitting an expensive truth. Probability high. Harry's stomach went cold and steady at the same time. His ledger sheet flashed in his mind. Hypothesis. More exist. Now it wasn't hypothesis. It was audit result. Griphook adjusted the needle slightly and the crystal disc's hum changed pitch. Har. Wise rune sight caught it. The diary's knot was dense, layered, and wrapped in defensive loops designed to punish tampering. Severance risk? Karst asked. Griphook's eyes narrowed. High, if destroyed blindly. Backlash possible. Dumbledore's jaw clenched. Backlash. Griphook looked at Harry's scar. Anchors can be linked by intent. Destroying one improperly can trigger a surge. It can lash out. It can seek a new host. Harry's blood turned to ice. The diary's ink wrote again, frantic and furious now. I can move. I can leave. I can go into him. Harry's scar burned like it was being tugged. Harry counted until the numbers became a wall. Dumbledore raised his wand and the black letters dissolved into nothing. For once, Griphook looked faintly impressed by human control. Karst's voice stayed calm. Containment remains priority. Destruction requires correct method. Dumbledore's tone was clipped. Basilisk venom destroys Horcruxes. Silence again, this time because everyone understood what that meant. The basilisk in the chamber wasn't just a monster. It was a reagent, a solution, a tool. Griphook's eyes gleamed. So the weapon becomes the key. Harry's stomach tightened. The basilisk is still alive. Dumbledore's gaze flicked to him, startled. You didn't kill it. Harry's voice stayed flat. I pinned it. I prioritized extraction. Griphook's mouth twitched. Correct priorities. Dumbledore looked like he wanted to argue, like every heroic story in his bones demanded the monster be slain, but the ledger logic was hard to deny. Karst spoke, and the room turned colder with policy. Gringotts will negotiate access to basilisk venom. Dumbledore's eyes hardened. Hogwarts will not allow a goblin expedition into its foundations. Griphook's voice was dry. Then Hogwarts will continue to be surprised by things living under it. Harry's scar pulsed faintly, delighted by conflict. Harry counted. Then he said the only thing that mattered. Ginny, he reminded them, voice sharp. And the next victim. Dumbledore's expression tightened. He exhaled, slow. Very well, he said. We will discuss terms. Griphook's eyes gleamed. Karst nodded once, as if a transaction had been approved. After the audit, Dumbledore stopped Harry outside the annex corridor. Not in the chamber. Not under goblin ears. In the liminal space where Hogwarts stone met treaty stone. Harry, he said softly, I do not like what they are making you. Harry looked at him. He didn't hate Dumbledore. He hated the method Dumbledore represented, the belief that warmth could fix a system built on hunger. What are they making me? Harry asked. Dumbledore's eyes held his. A weapon. Harry's scar pulsed faintly, amused. Harry counted. They are making me consistent, Harry said quietly. Dumbledore flinched at the word. Harry continued, voice low, controlled. The diary tried to use fear. My scar tried to use chaos. Hogwarts hides traps under songs. He met Dumbledore's gaze. I don't want to be brave, Harry said. Brave is noisy. Brave gets you killed. Dumbledore's mouth thinned. And what do you want? Harry didn't hesitate. I want to audit immortality, he said. Dumbledore stared. Then, very quietly, he said, that is, not a child's wish. Harry's voice stayed flat. Childhood wasn't in my contract. For a moment, something in Dumbledore's eyes cracked. Pain. Real this time. But then the headmaster mask slid back into place. If you continue, Dumbledore warned softly, you will attract attention you cannot yet imagine. Harry's mouth tightened. Attention already owns my name. Dumbledore reached out, slowly, like he might touch Harry's shoulder. Harry didn't move away, but he didn't lean in either. Dumbledore's hand stopped short. I will not stop you from seeking truth, he said finally. But I will try to keep you from becoming cold enough to enjoy it. Harry's scar pulsed, annoyed. Harry counted. I don't enjoy it, Harry said. He looked down at his marked palm. I just don't want it to enjoy me. That night, Harry returned to his niche and updated the ledger. Anchor 01 confirmed. Horcrux Tom Riddle Bold. Destruction method. Basilisk venom high confidence. Risk. Backlash if improper severance. Action. Identify additional anchors before mass destruction. He stared at the last line a long time. Then, slowly, he wrote. Anchor 02. Unknown, faint resonance detected in Castle Stone, possible. He hadn't told anyone about that yet. Because it wasn't proven. Because proven things triggered politics. But he had felt it, faint. Like a second knot humming deep inside Hogwarts' bones, answering the diary and the scar like a far-off bell. He stood, walked to the niche wall, and pressed his palm against the stone. The rune mark warmed faintly. Hogwarts hummed back, and for a heartbeat, just one, Harry's rune sight caught a thin, distant thread running somewhere up through the castle, hidden behind layers of charm and tradition. A seam, a buried keyhole, a second anchor hiding in plain sight. Harry's scar burned as if it wanted him to chase it. Harry counted until the burn dulled. Then he smiled, small, sharp, goblin-like. Found you, he whispered to the stone. Because now it wasn't a war story. It was an audit. And Harry Potter had been trained to follow threads until the vault door opened. By morning, Hogwarts had become a rumor engine. By afternoon, it had become a courtroom. Not in the Great Hall. Hogwarts preferred the theater of feasts and applause for its ritu. But in a stone conference chamber off the staff corridor where the air always smelled faintly of parchment and old arguments. The walls were lined with portraits that pretended to nap and listened anyway. Harry sat in the back. As protocol required, present, visible, not equal. His goblin-stitched robe looked sharper in this room than it had any right to. The ward band on his wrist stayed warm and steady. The rune mark on his palm was faint, but he could feel it like a second heartbeat whenever people spoke about him as if he wasn't there. Across the table sat Dumbledore, calm as a man balancing a knife on his finger. To Dumbledore's right sat McGonagall, rigid with restrained fury. To his left sat Snape, expressionless as poison. And opposite them, like a crack in the castle's authority made into a person, sat Envoy Karst, with Grippick at his shoulder. Karst placed a thin metal case on the table. Not a briefcase. A containment case. Runes crawled across it like frost. The Horcrux remains secured, Karst said pleasantly. McGonagall flinched at the word. Snape's eyes sharpened. Dumbledore's voice was controlled. Good. Then we can proceed to the point. Karst smiled. The point is venom. The portrait seemed to breathe in. Dumbledore didn't look away. Basilisk venom destroys Horcruxes. Karst nodded. And basilisk venom is a restricted asset. McGonagall's voice snapped. It is a monster beneath our school. Griphook's tone was mild. A monster is still an asset, Professor. It simply has poor manners. Snape's lip curled. Your manners are hardly superior. Griphook's eyes gleamed. Ours are honest. Dumbledore raised one hand and the room cooled. Enough, he said softly. Then, to Karst, Hogwarts will not permit a goblin expedition into the Chamber of Secrets. Karst's smile didn't falter. Then Hogwarts will permit a supervised extraction, with treaty observers, under sealed terms. Dumbledore's gaze narrowed. You want rights. We want precedent, Karst corrected. Voice smooth as coin. Griphook leaned forward slightly. And we want Hogwarts to stop pretending it has sole sovereignty over what sleeps under its floor. Mago. Noggle's knuckles whitened around her quill. This is extortion. Karst's eyes flicked to her quill. No. This is negotiation. Snape's voice cut in, low and dangerous. And what is Gringotts offering in exchange? Karst's smile sharpened. Containment expertise. Audit method. Reduced backlash risk. He tapped the metal case once. And, he added, we remove the artifact's political gravity from your school. Dumbledore's eyes tightened. By taking it for yourselves. By holding it properly, Griphook said. Harry watched the words collide and understood the true shape of the argument. Hogwarts wanted control because control meant reputation. Gringotts wanted access because access meant leverage. And Dumbledore wanted the Horcrux destroyed because it was the only moral outcome he could accept. But morality didn't move stone. Contracts did. Karst turned his head slightly. His gaze met Harry's. Asset, Karst said calmly. State operational requirement. The teacher's eyes snapped to Harry like he'd been promoted from rumor to weapon in a single syllable. Harry felt his scar stir, excited by attention. He counted once. Then spoke, short and precise. Venom, Harry said. Enough to destroy one confirmed anchor and test severance protocols. Also, controlled access to the chamber to confirm whether additional anchor resonance exists in the foundations. McGonagall's eyes widened. Mr. Potter. Dumbledore's gaze stayed locked on Harry, and for a moment Harry saw the old wizard trying to decide whether to be proud or afraid. Snape's voice was cold. You are requesting access to the chamber again. Harry didn't look at him. I am requesting method. Karst nodded as if approving a clause. Dumbledore exhaled slowly. Harry is not going back down there. Harry's fingers tightened inside his sleeve where the silver wedge rested. I'm not asking to go alone, Harry said. Griphook's eyes gleamed faintly. Good. Alone is wasteful. McGonagall turned to Dumbledore sharply. Albus. Dumbledore lifted a hand, and the room quieted again. Hogwarts, he said, voice gentle but steel-edged, will not allow a child to become a spelunker for Horcruxes. Harry's scar pulsed. Annoyed. Harry counted. Karst's smile was thin. Then Hogwarts will allow treaty observers to conduct extraction while the child remains above, as surface optics require. Snape's eyes narrowed. And you expect us to trust goblins beneath our school? Griphook's gaze was bright as a knife. Do you trust the basilisk? Silence. That silence was the answer. Dumbledore finally spoke, each word deliberate. Terms. Karst opened a folder and slid a parchment forward. It wasn't paper. It was vellum, thick, expensive, and stamped with treaty runes that ma. Did the air taste like pennies and old law? Harry didn't need to read it to understand the structure. Access granted, under supervision, for limited extraction, with defined quantities, and non-disclosure clauses that would choke gossip at the root. Dumbledore's eyes skimmed, and the faint tightening around them told Harry the clauses were sharp. McGonagall read and looked like she wanted to throw the parchment into the lake. Snape read and looked like he wanted to steal it. Dumbledore set it down. Harry does not descend, he said. Karst's gaze flicked to Harry, then back. Agreed. And, Dumbledore continued, voice colder now, Gringotts will not claim permanent rights to Hogwarts' foundations. Griphook's smile sharpened. We are not claiming the castle. We are claiming the venom. Karst nodded. No permanent claim, only extraction rights for this incident. Dumbledore's eyes narrowed. And the Horcrux, Karst's voice stayed calm, remains under Gringotts' containum, and until audited and destroyed properly. Dumbledore's jaw clenched. Then he said the words like swallowing poison. Very well. The portrait sighed like the castle itself resented agreeing. K.H. Arst produced a goblin silver stylus and signed first. Dumbledore signed second, wand tip pressing into ink as if the act pained him. When the final rune on the treaty parchment flared and settled, H. Ari felt it, A shift in the castle's ward lattice, like Hogwarts had been forced to acknowledge that something beneath it was no longer solely its business. A seam had been recorded in law. That night, they didn't take Harry to the chamber. They took him to the edge of it. To the girls' bathroom, sealed and empty, where Karst traced containment runes across the tiles like drawing borders on a map. McGonagall stood at the door with her arms crossed, expression like granite. Snape leaned against a sink, watching with predatory patience. Dumbledore stood in the middle, wand in hand, cowl. In the way a man became calm when he was trying not to show fear. Griphook and Karst moved like they belonged there. Harry stood back, hands clasped, a good asset. He hated how natural it felt. Karst hissed, Parseltongue. Clipped and controlled. The sink slid aside. The shaft opened. Cold air rose, wet and venom-scented. McGonagall flinched. Merlin preserve us. Griphook glanced at Harry. You opened it with sound. Harry nodded once. Frequency key. Griphook's eyes gleamed with approval. Karst turned to Dumbledore. We descend. Dumbledore's voice was steady. I am coming. Karst's smile was thin. Expected. Snape pushed off the sink. So am I. McGonagall's glare was lethal. Absolutely not. Snape's lip curled. Then you may explain to the board why we let goblins harvest a reagent under our floor without a Hogwarts agent present. McGonagall looked like she might hex him out of habit. Dumbledore exhaled. Severus will accompany us. Minerva stays to secure the corridor and manage students. McGonagall's jaw clenched. Albus. Dumbledore's gaze softened. If something goes wrong, the castle needs you above. McGonagall's mouth tightened, but she nodded. Harry watched them argue like watching humans try to weld a joint with feelings. Then Karst spoke the clause that mattered. Acid remains above, he said, looking at Harry. Protocol. Harry nodded. Dumbledore's gaze slid to him. A quiet plea hidden in it, stay safe. Harry didn't know what to do with that, so he didn't react. Griphook paused at the shaft, then looked up at Harry. Listen, Griphook said softly. If the chamber stirs again, if the castle hum changes, if your scar pulls. Harry's throat tightened. Count. Griphook's mouth twitched. Yes. And signal. Harry touched the ward band once. Griphook nodded, then disappeared into the dark. Dumbledore followed, robes whispering. Snape dropped in last like a shadow swallowed by a throat. The sink slid back into place. The bathroom became ordinary again. Almost. Harry sat on the cold tile floor with his back against the wall and did what he did best when he couldn't act. He listened. The castle's hum was layered and complex. But now he could hear the treaty annex below like a second heartbeat in the stone. Minutes passed. Then the stone trembled. Not a quake. A thrash. A deep pressure wave that made the tiles vibrate and Harry's teeth ache. The basilisk. His scar burned sharply. A pull, faint but hungry, like the knot inside him wanted to turn its head toward the chamber. Harry clenched his jaw and counted. 1, 2, 3. The burn dulled. Another tremor. Then silence so sudden it felt wrong. Harry held his breath, listening for the next movement. Nothing. Then, faint through stone, he felt it. A clean pulse. Treaty magic. A signal. Harry slapped his ward band twice in response, acknowledged. A minute later, the sink slid aside again. Karst climbed out first, cloak damp, eyes bright. Griphook followed. Hands stained dark, not blood. Venom. A glass vial floated behind Dumbledore under a careful levitation charm, sealed in runes and stoppers like it contained a small piece of death. Snape emerged last, face even paler than usual, robe scuffed, eyes sharp with contained fury. McGonagall stepped in instantly. Report. Karst held up the vial. Extraction successful. Quantity, sufficient for one destruction and assay. Dumbledore's voice was low. The basilisk remains alive. Snape's tone was poisonous. It is also now, agitated. Harry's stomach tightened. Agitated how? Harry asked, unable to stop himself. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment, then answered honestly. It recognized Parseltongue, he said quietly. It recognized authority. Harry's scar pulsed faintly, pleased. Harry counted until it stopped. Griphook's eyes gleamed. The chamber obeys sound. Karst's gaze sharpened. And sound obeys the one who speaks it correctly. Harry felt the weight of that settle over him like a collar. Dumbledore's eyes looked tired. Harry is not going to command a basilisk. Griphook's smile was thin. No, but someone might try to make him. Harry's blood went cold. The diary. The leash. The idea of someone turning him into the key for a monster. Harry clenched his hands until his marked palm ached. McGonagall looked between them, suddenly understanding the real danger. "We need to end this." Dumbledore nodded once. "We will," he said. They destroyed the diary at midnight, not because midnight was dramatic, but because midnight was quiet, fewer witnesses. Fewer variables. The annex chamber was rune-lit and cold. The diary lay on the plinth, bound and caged. The vial of venom rested nearby in a runed cradle, its green-black liquid thick as fate. Dumbledore stood with wand in hand. Karst stood with silver needle and crystal disc. Griphook stood with basalt ring. Harry stood behind the containment line, hands clasped, watching like an apprentice watching a lock being dismantled. The diary wrote in the air again, frantic now. "Don't do this. I can help you, Harry." The word Harry hit his scar like a hook. The knot inside him pulsed, eager. Harry counted hard. Griphook placed the basalt ring down. The words froze. Karst pressed the silver needle to the diary's spine. The crystal disc hummed, Mayas, roaring the anchor's tension like a heartbeat monitor. Dumbledore's wand tip glowed. He didn't look theatrical. He looked like a surgeon about to cut something poisonous out. "Ready," Karst said. Dumbledore lifted the vial with levitation. A single drop of venom fell onto the diary's leather cover. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the diary screamed. Not sound. Pressure. A psychic recoil that made Harry's vision blur and the scar burn like a brand. The ink exploded across the cover, writhing like a dying snake. The leather blackened instantly, corroding, collapsing into ash. The air thickened with something foul, rotten old hatred. The crystal disc's hum spiked. Karst snapped, "Hold." Griphook slammed a stabilizing rune into the stone with his palm. The backlash wave. E hit the basalt ring and shattered harmlessly into a cold mist. Harry's scar burned harder for a second, tugged by the dying anchor like a drowning man grabbing at the nearest rope. Harry's ward band flared, containment, stabilization. Override. His breathing forced itself into rhythm. In, out. He counted. The tug weakened. The diary collapsed into ash and brittle fragments, the last traces of ink evaporating like smoke. Silence. Real silence. Dumbledore exhaled slowly, shoulders dropping a fraction like he'd been carrying something heavy for 50 years and had finally set down one corner. Karst stared at the crystal disc. Anchor severed. No migration. Griphook's mouth twitched. Proper destruction. Harry didn't cheer. He wrote. In his ledger, his stylus moving clean and fast. Anchor 01 destroyed, method confirmed, backlash contained. Then he paused, stylus hovering. Because the scar in his skull still existed. Because the burn hadn't vanished. Because one anchor dying didn't end the network. Dumbledore turned to Harry. His eyes were soft again, but there was something new in them, respect edged with fear. "You were right," Dumbledore said quietly. "There are more." Harry didn't nod. He didn't smile. He simply asked the next necessary question. "How many?" Dumbledore's mouth tightened. "I don't know," he admitted. Griphook's eyes gleamed faintly. "We can find out." Karst's voice was calm as a vault door closing. "We will find out." Harry looked down at his marked palm. Keth. Wedge. Breaker. He looked up at the adults who had been playing chess with his life since he was a baby. And he understood, with cold clarity, what came next. The war wouldn't be fought with duels and speeches. It would be fought with audits, seizures, and controlled severance. A war of riches and blood, exactly as the Deep had predicted. Harry closed his ledger. He pressed his palm to the annex stone. The rune warmed. The castle hummed back. And far above, in the layers of Hogwarts, wards, he felt that faint distant thread again. Another seam, another hidden keyhole. Another anchor waiting to be found. The diary died quietly. Hogwarts did not. By breakfast, the castle had already rebuilt the lie, that everything was normal again, that a monster under the school was a myth and not a matter of public record. The teachers wore steadier faces. The students laughed too loudly. The way people did when they wanted the world to stop being sharp. Only Harry felt the absence. The diary's pulse was gone from his basalt pouch. And yet his scar still burned sometimes, faint, irregular, like a knot in a rope that refused to loosen. One anchor severed. One network revealed. The ledger was not finished. At the Slytherin table, Draco watched. Harry with a different kind of caution now. Not contempt. Calculation edged with the fear of someone realizing the game had rules he didn't understand. You did it, Draco said quietly when no one else was close enough to pretend they weren't listening. You stopped it. Harry didn't correct him. Stopping it was a story. Harry had interrupted it. You had a diary, Harry said flatly. Your family introduced the anchor. Draco's face tightened. I didn't know. Not knowing doesn't remove liability, Harry replied. Draco stared at him like Harry was speaking a foreign language. Because he was. Ledger language. Draco swallowed. So what now? Harry's stylus tapped once against the edge of his plate, one precise, quiet sound. Now, he said, we audit the rest. The meeting that followed was not held in Hogwarts. Hogwarts would have turned it into morality. This needed accounting. They met in the treaty annex beneath the castle, where stone listened and walls didn't pretend to care about feelings. Dumbledore arrived with McGonagall and Snape. Gringotts arrived with Karst, Griphook, and two goblins Harry hadn't met before, silent, lean, tool belts heavy, eyes like sealed vaults. One of them carried a rolled map made of thick parchment. Not Hogwarts map, a Gringotts map. It unfurled across the table, and Harry felt the shift in the air immediately. The map wasn't just ink. It was a resonance overlay, Hogwarts ward lattice translated into a language of lines, nodes, pressure points. McGonagall stared. That is, a structural survey, Karst said smoothly. Non-invasive, treaty compliant. Snape's lip curled. You mapped my castle. Griphook's eyes gleamed. Your castle mapped itself. We simply listened. Dumbledore didn't argue. His gaze stayed on Harry. Harry placed his ledger down in the center of the table like a thesis. Ledger of immortality, audit required. Dumbledore's voice was low. Harry, there is danger in calling it that. Harry didn't blink. Names prevent denial. Karst nodded once, pleased. Dumbledore sighed. Very well. He tapped the map, pointing at the castle like it was a patient with a disease. If Voldemort created more Horcruxes, they will be hidden. Protected. Likely tied to significant objects. Griphook's voice was calm. Humans choose sentimental anchors. Karst added, sentiment creates predictability. Harry's stylus hovered over the map. We start with where resonance already exists. McGonagall stiffened. Resonance. Harry nodded. After the diary audit, I detected a faint thread, castle stone answering the anchor. Something buried. Snape's eyes sharpened. You detected a Horcrux inside Hogwarts. Dumbledore's jaw tightened. He didn't deny it. Possible, he said carefully. There are rumors. Griphook's mouth twitched. Rumors are lazy audits. Karst's gaze slid to Dumbledore. Then we do a real one. They didn't storm Hogwarts like heroes. They did it like bankers. Over the next weeks, Gringotts petitioned for maintenance access to specific ward nodes under treaty clauses no one had read in centuries. Hogwarts protested. The ministry sent letters. The letters died in committees like all soft resistance did. And in the quiet spaces between classes, Harry learned to read Hogwarts the way he read vaults. Not just the moving staircases. Not just the portraits. The bones beneath. He found seams where ancient magic met newer repairs. Places where a charm had been patched over a crack rather than rebuilt correctly. Places where the castle's ward lattice thinned, not because it was weak, but because it was avoiding something inside its own stone. By December, Harry had 3 marks in his ledger. Anchor 01 destroyed. Diary, confirmed. Anchor 00, present. Scar, confirmed. Anchor 02 suspected. Hogwarts Foundation resonance, under investigation. The third line was the one that kept him awake. Because if an anchor could hide inside Hogwarts, then none of the safe places were safe. That fact didn't scare him anymore. It clarified him. The pressure came in January. The ministry couldn't tolerate a child acting like an audit clerk over the nation's greatest hero-villain legend. The Daily Prophet couldn't tolerate the story being quiet. And pure-blood families couldn't tolerate Gringotts having a weapon, walking among their children. So they tried to claim him. First came invitations. Tea with the Malfoys. Dinner with the Greengrasses. A philanthropic guardianship offer, from a Wizengamot member whose smile didn't reach his eyes. Harry rejected them all with the same sentence. I do not enter contracts without Gringotts. They shifted tactics. Then came sympathy. Letters about his parents. Stories about what Lily would have wanted. Presents wrapped in warmth. Harry didn't open them. He logged them. Attempted hooks, sentimental, risk, emotional spike, mitigation, counting, ward band stabilization. Then came threats. Subtle ones. Whispers that he was not really British anymore. That he was tainted by goblin influence. That his scar made him unsafe to house. Harry listened. And he learned something important. Humans didn't fear goblins because goblins were violent. Humans feared goblins because goblins remembered. Goblins didn't forget theft. They didn't forget lies. And they didn't forgive contracts broken because someone felt bad. The second anchor revealed itself in spring. Not with a scream, with a hum. It happened during a routine survey under the castle. Harry, Griphook, Karst, and Dumbledore walking through a maintenance tunnel where Hogwarts wards ran thick through the stone-like veins. The crystal disc, Griphook's resonance instrument, began to sing. A low, steady hum had made Harry's teeth ache the way the diary had. Dumbledore's hand tightened around his wand. Griphook didn't flinch. There. The sound came from above them, stone ceiling, ancient, carved. Harry's rune sight caught it instantly, a thin thread of foreign resonance woven into the castle's foundation wards like a parasite hiding in architecture. Harry's scar burned in response. Two anchors recognizing each other. Harry counted hard, steadying himself. Karst placed a hand on the stone and murmured a rune in gobbledygook. The wall didn't open like a door. It revealed a seam that had been pretending not to exist. A hidden cavity. Inside, resting in dust older than nations, was an object no one expected to find in a place like this. A ring. Small. Plain-looking. Blackened with age. But Harry's eyes saw past, plain. It was a knot. A mechanism. A locked promise of immortality, hiding under the safest school in Britain like a joke told by a murderer. Dumbledore's face went very still. I feared, he whispered, that he would do this. Harry's voice was flat. Then we destroy it. Griphook's eyes narrowed. Correct method. Karst nodded. Venom. They didn't destroy it in the tunnel. They moved it in a basalt case, sealed and clamped, like moving a live curse through a corridor full of children. And that night, in the annex chamber, they fed it a drop of basilisk venom. The ring screamed, not sound, but pressure that made the stone vibrate. Harry's scar burned, tugged faintly, like the dying anchor tried to latch onto him. The ward band flared, forcing his breath into rhythm. He counted until the tug faded. The ring collapsed into ash. Anchor severed. Another ledger line. Anchor O2 destroyed. Ring, castle foundation, confirmed. Dumbledore sat down afterward like he'd suddenly felt his age. How many? Harry asked again. Dumbledore's voice was quiet. More than two. Griphook's eyes gleamed. Then we keep auditing. Karst's smile was thin. Until the network collapses. The war didn't return the way prophecy predicted. Voldemort didn't rise into a dramatic, public terror in Harry's fourth year. He couldn't. Because the roots of his immortality were being cut quietly. Systematically, without spectacle. Every severed anchor reduced his ability to push back into the world. Every destroyed knot weakened the invisible scaffolding holding his spirit together. Instead of a Dark Lord returning as a storm, he returned as a problem. A fugitive shape that couldn't stabilize. A presence that tried to possess and failed more often than it succeeded. The Ministry didn't know why their nightmares kept dying in dark corners. Gringotts did. And so did Harry. By the time Harry turned 17, the wizarding world had changed without realizing when it changed. There was no single battle. No grand duel with applause. There were seizures. There were audits. There were unexpected inheritances, uncovered that destroyed political careers overnight. There were bloodline claims that collapsed old families. There were vault clauses rewritten so that treaties included goblin oversight on any artifact classified as soul anchor risk. Most of all, there was a new truth carved into law. Immortality schemes are a security breach. Security breaches are subject to audit. Audit belongs to those who understand vault law. The Ministry had no choice but to accept it. Because the alternative was chaos. And chaos, Harry had learned, was just fear with no shape. He had spent his life shaping fear into lines. On the day Voldemort finally failed, quietly, almost pathetically, it didn't happen in a graveyard. It happened in a room under Gringotts where the air smelled like metal and old secrets. They had found the last anchor. Not a grand relic. Not a legendary artifact. A cheap-looking thing hidden inside a locked box inside a vault behind 3 false wards. A desperate redundancy. Harry placed it on a plinth. Dumbledore stood beside him, older now, eyes heavy with years. Griphook and Karst watched from behind a containment line. Harry held the vial of venom. His scar pulsed faintly, like the knot inside him knew the network was collapsing. Harry counted once. Then he let a single drop fall. The anchor screamed and died. And somewhere far away, a fragment of Voldemort's remaining self tried to latch onto the nearest vessel. Harry felt it claw at the scar knot like a drowning man grabbing a rope. But the scar knot was caged, contained, and, most importantly, isolated. Gringotts' ward band flared, sealing Harry's magic into a hard, stable shell. No migration, no takeover, no dramatic explosion, just failure. Voldemort's last tether snapped, and the room went quiet. Dumbledore exhaled. For a moment, he looked at Harry not as a prophecy or a child, but as the unavoidable product of every adult mistake. "It's over," Dumbledore whispered. Harry didn't smile. He looked at the ash on the plinth. Then he looked at his ledger, pages thick now, filled with anchor numbers and methods and dates. He closed it gently. "It's audited," he corrected. Years later, when people told stories about Harry Potter, they didn't know how to place him. He didn't fit the hero mold. He didn't preach. He didn't seek applause. He didn't forgive in public, or pose for portraits, or smile like the world had fixed itself. Instead, he became something stranger. A bridge, a border, a living clause. Gringotts made him a permanent liaison, the first human ever granted a seat in the Under Councils. Not because he was loved, but because he was consistent. The Ministry learned to negotiate with goblins using language that didn't rely on charm. Hogwarts, forced to acknowledge its hidden rot, began rebuilding its wards properly, less whimsy, more integrity. And Harry sat often in rooms made of stone and quiet, his goblin silver tools laid out neatly, his ledger open. His stylus singing softly as it etched runes into new law. He never took a throne of gold. Gold was temporary. He took a throne of steel and ancient secrets, not a chair, not a crown, but a position the world couldn't ignore. The one who decided what counted as secure. Sometimes, late at night, he would press 2 fingers to his scar and feel the faint, contained warmth there. The last anchor. His. Not destroyed, not freed, managed. Because some problems weren't solved by bravery. They were solved by discipline. He would count, quiet, steady, until the pulse settled. And then he would return to his work. Because the wizarding world would always create new curses. New loopholes. New schemes that thought they were clever. And somewhere beneath all the noise, beneath all the human drama, the deep earth truth remained. Everything valuable is protected by traps. And traps can be broken. Not with force, with understanding.